Building my first FPV drone was an absolute nightmare. It ended with me spending hundreds of unnecessary dollars on the wrong parts and actually losing the drone for countless hours due to a few critical mistakes I made while building. So in today's video, I'll be walking you through every single step to building your first FPV drone, explaining what all of the parts do, and running through every critical mistake that I made to make sure that you don't do the same. This whole video is designed to be a build with me experience, so I won't be randomly speeding things up or cutting parts out. It's all about being there with you for every moment until you're actually flying in the skies. So to make sure your first build experience is the easiest and smoothest process that's ever happened in the FPV hobby, I'm going to run you through everything that you need in order to follow along with this video. First and foremost, the Kiwi Quad's 5-inch drone kit, or if you aren't able to purchase it, you'll need to grab all of the parts separately. Secondly, you'll need a computer for the software setup later on. Don't worry if it's Mac, Windows, or Linux, they all work just as well as one another. Thirdly though, you'll need a pair of analog FPV goggles. Fourthly, a remote controller, and finally, a transmitter and receiver to connect the drone to your controller. I'll explain what those do properly later on in the video. But look, there's a whole bunch of recommended options from budget to the best on the Kiwi Quad's kit page, so if you haven't actually considered any of that side of things just yet, feel free to head on over there and get yourself set up. Also, if you like the option to read a detailed build manual alongside this video, you can find this one down in the description box below. I'll be following it through nearly every single step of the way, but there are a few additional parts from the guide that I won't be covering, such as the complete process of actually tuning your drone. So if you're keen to dive fully into this, you've got the option to, and it is worth mentioning here too that together with Kiwi Quads, we're actually sending every single penny from the purchase of this guide straight back into supporting the FPV community in both education and engagement. We're here to help this hobby grow, and we're stoked to have you along on this journey with us. So without any further ado, grab a coffee, grab some brain food, and let's get started at the workbench. This is the box that everything comes in. It's made by Kiwi Quads, which is a New Zealand company. Super awesome company. Highly rate them. But if for whatever reason you aren't buying this particular kit, all of the parts are down in the description box below, so you can actually create this quad still regardless of if you buy the kit or not. But this kit has got some super good features to it which are actually going to be more helpful than just buying all the parts. So if you have the option, I'd highly recommend going this direction. If you don't, buy all the parts below. So what have we got inside? First up, I'm going to remove the two additional things which I have got additionally. I'll get to those in a second. But if you've bought just the kit, this is everything that comes with it. So this here is your frame. This is the TBS Source 1 frame. It's an open source frame. Doesn't necessarily matter what exactly that means right now. Basically though, this here is the entire drone. This is what everything gets seated inside. So that's pretty damn important. We've got a little consumables pack that's got a bit of miscellaneous stuff which we'll get to. ELRS here, this is what connects your controller to your drone and actually makes sure that you can actually control it. Propellers, they're self-explanatory. 2 battery straps, bloody good, we need battery straps. Then, these 4 little boxes here, these are your motors. So, you got 4 motors for the 4 arms, which are in this little bag for your drone parts, your frame parts I mean. Then we've got the Speedy B stack, and this here is going to be having your ESC and your flight controller in it. Both of these are pretty much the brain cells of your entire drone. Pretty important stuff. Man, I say pretty important stuff like none of the stuff here is important, but it's all damn important. Then this here is your camera. This is what you actually see your view from. This is what you see in your goggles. And then this here is your VTX. This is what connects basically your camera to your goggles. So this is what allows you to be able to get the signal. This is what you see. So those kind of go hand in hand. Then we've got 2 very important things in this kit, a fruit burst and of course a business card. The fruit burst is the most important part. It's vital. If you don't have a fruit burst, what do you even, you need the fruit burst, so keep that. We'll put the box aside and move on over to these 2 additional parts. So what these are going to do is allow you to basically build this entire kit, this entire thing, without needing additional tools, which is pretty damn important. This here is the TPU pack. This is what's going to basically provide you with customization, and it's going to allow you to put anything you want onto the TBS Source 1 frame. You can buy that in whatever color you like. There are so many damn colors, it's difficult to even choose from. But then this here is the most important part of it all. This is also an additional part for the kit that you can purchase. It's a toolkit by iFlight, and it comes with everything that you're going to need to actually complete this build. You've got solder, a soldering iron. There's a soldering iron little piece in there that, you know, holds the soldering iron. You got a flux pen. There's also the cable here for an XT60, so hook this up to a battery, and then you can plug your soldering iron in. You got the prop tool, which has also got your hex driver parts on it. That's going to be pretty damn important. A little pair of tweezers here, and of course your side cutters. So those are all very important parts. You're going to need this stuff if you don't buy this toolkit regardless. So buying the toolkit just simply makes your life easier. I would recommend it, and it's going to be more than capable of everything that you're going to need. We'll pop that one back closed for a second, and then it's time to get started. So what are we grabbing first? I'm going to put everything else here back away into the box so we're not confusing ourselves. And I recommend that you probably do the same too. So literally everything back in here. Keep it out the way. Maybe keep the fruit burst out. But keep this out. Keep your frame out. That's what we're going to be working on next. Cool. So now that that is away, this is your frame. Let's open her on up. Oh, my little battery grip in there. There we go. Cool. So starting off, you're going to be needing these two pieces, which is your bottom plate, and it's got some press nuts in there. You're going to need all 4 of your arms. You're going to need your little screws. You're going to need this little piece in here, which is like an arm locking wedge. You're not going to need these 3 parts, which is your battery grip, the top plate, and your... These are the little bits that are going to hold your drone together. I've forgotten the name. Fantastic. Anyways, let's take all these parts out. You can put your 2 camera stack pieces aside. Over there. Grab those. And we're going to sort these screws out in just a second. Come on. Out we go. Lovely. And there we go. Righty. So, you got your 4 arms, your little arm wedge, and your 2 plates that we're going to need. Of course, all of these screws here. So what we've got here is 4 14mm screws, 4 12mm screws, and 16 10mm screws. Now, what we're going to do is basically the easiest way to figure out which one's which is find the tallest one, which is this one in my case. I'm putting that there. That seems to be the second tallest, and then this one here is the third tallest, so put that there. Then you're going to match them all up. So easiest way to do this is find all your tall ones, put them over there. These are all your 14mm. That's another 14mm, and that's another 14mm. Then find your next slightly tallest ones, those ones, and still missing one more there. Then all of these ones are all to go in there because there's only 3 sizes here. So those are all sorted. We've got 10mm M3 screws, we've got 12mm M3 screws, and 14mm M3 screws. What we're going to be doing is grabbing this bottom plate, the one without the press nuts on it, and it's got these little slots for your camera plate, and you're going to find these ones, your little 12mm. Now, there is a 30 by 30 stack screw size here, and a 20 by 20 stack screw size here. So what we're going to be using for this first bit is these inner holes here. And you just literally pick a side, doesn't matter. You're going to thread these in there, and they can be definitely a little bit tight. And we'll get to that in a second. Pop them in, like that. Going to come over here to our toolbox, and this is where we're going to need our first tool. Yay! First tool of the day is our, good lordy, come here. First tool of the day is our prop tool. Now, the reason we got our prop tool is so we have our hex drivers. So if you have a different type of hex driver, this is the time to grab your hex driver out. We don't need the prop tool technically just yet. What we're going to do though is come in here, wrong size, come in here, and just thread these all the way through until they are tight against the bottom. You may not need to do this, it just depends on the carbon that the frame's been cut from. Sometimes it'll thread through absolutely quickly, other times they're not going to thread through quick at all, like now. So we're going to thread those through. Lovely, lovely. Okay, so those are all through. That makes life nice and simple. Cool, so those are sitting there like that right now. Next, we're going to grab this, our little arm wedge, and we're going to place that in the middle, very simply, very cute. Now, if you have a look at your arms, you're going to notice that there is a more angular edge and then a less angular edge. Now, what's going to happen is if you try to put one angular edge, so say our long angular edge, the more angular edge facing that way, and the other angular edge facing this way, you can see these are completely different, like the way they sit, completely differently. What we want is we want them to look like this. So you want them to be as wide as possible without, obviously, not having the wedge in there. So that means this most angular piece needs to be facing inwards. So this is another part of wiggling this stuff in. It's going to be a little bit tight, but you'll get there. And you can always thread it through a lot more like this. So literally just pulling that arm down by threading that through, which makes life simple. So pull those down. And again, your frame may not need this. We're not actually tightening anything here. I'm just putting the arms into the wedges. Come over here. Again, this is going to be another important point. You don't want to have one facing in and one facing out like that. So instead, we're going to put both edges, okay, it's not coming off now, put both of these longer, more angular edges facing the inner part of the drone so that it sits comfortably facing outwards as well. Yeah, let's see what we got here. Look at that one, see? That one just went on pretty damn easily. And then this one's not going to go on easily at all. So again, back to giving a little tighten up. Hopefully we can get that one in easily. Cool, we'll thread that one down as well. Nice, that one's threaded down. And this one here needs to be threaded down as well. That one is not even actually going down, so maybe it can just be pressed down. Maybe not. There we go. That's looking nearly there. Basically what I'm trying to achieve here is just making sure that all of these little arms are flat, because right now this little guy is not quite there. Close to it, but not quite. So yeah, it can just be a little bit fiddly to start off with, and that is a-okay. Okay, that's pretty flat now. So, one thing to check out really quickly here is the fact that all of our arms are facing outwards. They're nice and long, so you don't want them to be tight, and you don't want them to be tight there, and you want these both to be facing out long ways. Then, you're gonna grab this one. This plate has got your little press nuts in it. And this is what you're actually gonna be screwing these into now. So, for me, these are pretty damn tight already. For you, they might still be quite loose, which is perfectly fine. You're going to grab this, place it over the top here, and making sure that we are creating a long frame and we're not going like that and just cutting the frame short. Creating a nice long frame. The press nuts are going to face upwards, and we're going to fire this drone back over, and we're going to grab our hex driver and start to actually screw into each of the press nuts. Now for me, I'm going to need to do these bit by bit because of Got them pretty tight already. Get them all started. Just like that. Lovely, lovely. So you're going to want to do them up fairly tight, but not like stupidly tight so that we strip anything, because obviously that's not going to be an ideal situation if we strip something. So nice and tight. And lovely. Now I've got a nice solid frame, and you're going to notice that some of your arms are going to wiggle a tad, and that's perfectly okay, because we still got to put these ones here in. Now, these screws are not with this kit just yet. This is where we've got to break open the box again. So come in here, open the box up, and we're going to grab out our Speedy Beast stack. So this here has got the ESC and the flight controller in it. Again, pop the box aside, and now we open up our stack. This is the brains of our entire drone. How beautiful, right? But right now we're not after the actual brains, so just, okay, well, that works too. We can put them over to the side for now, and we're going to open up here, come down to our accessories, and we are after these bad boys. So right now, all of this here can just pop back in there and set aside for now with the stacks. And we're going to aim to grab these guys out. So let's come in here. I'm just going to pull out 4 of these, giving us an extra one here as well. There we go. So you just need 4. So for these, they're going to go in through the arms, and then they're going to start threading straight through into here. And yes, you're going to have to thread them the whole way, because we've also got press nuts on there too. So they shouldn't need to be threaded using a prop. We're using the hex driver too much, but for me, it's just a little bit easier to just kind of spin them until I get maybe a bit more of a grip. No. So we'll put these all in. And what these are going to do, these are going to actually eventually hold our stack over there, which is going to, there we go, which is just going to sit on each of these 4 little stack screws. That's what these are called. Well, not little stack screws, they're decently sized stack screws, really, aren't they? So again, it's a tad of a tedious process, but honestly, building a drone is a little bit tedious, so that's okay. That's part of the fun of this. The fact that we're literally building something from the ground up, and we're creating something that's going to fly soon. Like, I don't know if you've quite figured that one out yet. The fact that, holy crap, this thing's going to fly soon. I don't know. It always kind of hits hard when you first get it into the sky, because of how much time, effort, and also well, I'm going to say it, the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into building these things. Sometimes, and quite often, things aren't going to go super smoothly, and you just got to understand that that's actually okay, and that there's always going to be a fix to something. Something is always going to go wrong at some point, and that's where the community comes in, guys. Honestly, when I was building my first drone, well, if you've seen any of my videos, you'd know that everything went wrong, and I ended up losing the drone, and it came down to the fact that I didn't follow the basic instructions that I really should have at first. So there are plenty of mistakes you can make. There's also plenty of things that can just go wrong from the manufacturer as well. But either way, we're aiming today for a clean, easy, no blood, sweat, or tears at all build. And if we can get that, how good's that going to be? Right. Last stack screw in here. Fire it down. Yeah, this is a... It takes quite a while. But that's alright. Oh, look at that. We can even spin the drone. Do-do-do-do. 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 Okay. Okay. Back into being normal again. Sorry. Got to have fun with these things, guys. All right, again, tight, but not stupidly tight. Now your goddamn frame is going to be rigid as, and you're not going to be moving, which is exactly what we want. So, little recap on what we should have right now. Let me use some tweezers because these things look awesome. So, up the top here, you should have on the bottom plate, so the lower one, you should have your little camera slots. On this top one, you should have a little mounting slot for our VTX, and basically, everything should be looking nice and wide and not closed. Cool. We have gotten a lot of the frame done right now, and it can be very tempting right now to grab the rest of your frame, be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put it all together. This is gonna be fun. But no, we're leaving that stuff for now. We actually aren't gonna need any of, well, we're gonna need these soon, but we aren't gonna need this stuff until later on. So right now we're keeping it as the frame itself like this. Keep these screws out, and instead of building the rest of it right now, we're gonna do what's called a dry fit out. Now, this is gonna help you kind of understand where everything is gonna go, and if you aren't using a kit in the future, this is really good practice to get into, so you know where everything's gonna go, how it's gonna fit, if it's gonna fit, etc., etc. So, this is actually quite fun. What we're gonna need is everything. So you're gonna need to get your ELRS little component module out, you're gonna need to get your VTX module out, and your camera out. Don't worry about your motors just yet. We'll get to them shortly. But you need those things. Pop the back aside. What we've got over here is two components. One of them has got these big little solder joints on there, and the other has got a USB-C joint on there, or USB-C port. What you need to do here is put your ESC down at the bottom here, and I'd put these two facing backwards, just like that. And then, following the similar shape, so we've got this little indent and a little indent out here, we're going to put your flight controller on top of that. Look at that. How good does that look right now? Next, we're going to grab our VTX. So this here is going to be the bit that communicates from your drone to your goggles. And you're going to see that it comes in multiple little parts. And then pop this little piece just there for now. Lovely. Come over here to our camera. We're going to need to pop that open as well. Beautiful. And then you're going to find your little camera in here. Look how cute that little guy is. He's going to sit up there. And what you can do, if you want to have a little bit of fun here and make it seem like your drone's a little bit more together, grab your little camera plates, which are from your kit, the frame kit. Pop it there, pop it in there, and just pop your camera in like that. Then, the last thing we need to try and dry fit in here, well actually no, the second to last thing still, is our ELRS module. So we're going to open this one here up. I'm going to grab this little bad boy. This here is what makes the controller talk to the drone, and vice versa. It helps the communication there. This is going to sit for us just right in there. And I'm pulling the drone apart. Last thing to think about here is from the ESC and flight controller, this is your capacitor. And where that's going to sit for us is right about there, just like that. Now, I just lied to you there. That's not the last thing. We actually still need to grab this. This is what's going to actually power your drone, basically. This is going to come and sit just over here, and I don't have that right way. It's going to sit just like that. And that is the basis of how the drone's going to look. And this is how you know that everything's going to actually fit. Thankfully, these TBS Source 1 massive drone frames allow for most things to fit within them, which is fantastic for us. So, next stage going forward from here, what are we going to do? This is kind of the fun part over, if you will. Now it gets a little bit more serious, okay? So this is where we need to calm those nerves down a little bit, and we're going to need to put all our parts back in a little place where we can find them again. Make life nice and simple for us. Now that we know everything's going to fit, happy model. You can fire back in there, and we can put our little frame parts back away as well. Because our next stage is getting this thing up and running, because this is our ESC, and this here is what controls the power directly into the quad and also the power distribution to our motors, which we'll get to shortly. So we're going to need to break out of our toolbox our soldering iron equipment, which for this little iFlight toolkit is this little bad boy, our cable, and soldering iron itself, and some TVS solder too, which is what we'd like. You're going to need to come and wet this little sponge here, so I'm going to go quickly do that right now. Beautiful. So we've got, this here has got a nice little wet sponge on there, which is what we like. Going to need to plug in our soldering iron, and for that I have brought along a battery. This battery is a little bit screwed because of some freestyle I was doing, but it's fully charged up, so we know that we're actually going to have some power to this. Now, before we start attacking this ESC, we're going to actually take it off the quad. I'm going to put our quad frame off to the side for now. I'm just going to be working solely on the ESC here. Now, something that can come in super helpful for some soldering tips, is a bit of blue tack. What you can do is pull some, oh jeepers, we're knocking everything over. Pull some blue tack off, make a bit of a ball, and then this stuff is going to allow you to basically stick wires in places and not have them flying around. Because next what we're grabbing is our capacitor. This is from our flight controller, and this is from our ESC and flight controller accessories. Then we're also going to be grabbing out of our little box again our little consumables pack. So put that back to the side for now, and out of the consumables pack we are grabbing some wire. Now we're also going to have to come over here and grab our little wire snips, and this is how we're going to prepare our wire. So what we've got now, to recap everything you should have: capacitor, 22 gauge wire, both red and black, your ESC, some blue tack if you want, wire snips, your soldering iron, and anything else that comes along with your soldering iron. So that's solder, the battery for it, which we're going to plug in now. I'm going to set that to about 300. That'll be fine for now. Lovely. So whilst that's heating up, we're going to come to our wire, and let's start off by first of all turning this over. This is our ESC. We're turning it over to the bottom, so you should be able to see a little what does it say? AJM port there. That's like for your little ribbon cable, which we'll get to soon. We're going to come in here and we're going to very gently score the edges whilst twisting the wire to make sure that we pop it off a tad amount. Then we're going to spin it nice and tight, super nice and tight. Very good. We're going to do the exact same with our other wire. Over here, score it gently, pop it off, and then twist. Now, what we're going to first do is we're going to, holy heck, I'm getting confused, get our solder, and we're going to tin, very simply, we're going to tin the tips of our wire. So to do that, you just put the heat onto the wire and then put a bit of solder onto the wire itself. Nice. That one's nice and simple. Pop that off the blue tack, over to the side. Grab that bit of black wire. Come over here, and again, same thing. Heat the wire up from the bottom. Pop a bit of solder on the top of it when it eventually heats up. There we go. And then you can always wipe off your excess solder onto your sponge there. That's what it's for. Gotta love it. Cool. So now you've got two tinned up little bits of wire. Gonna come over here with our black wire to this black terminal. Now there are two options. The first one is to indeed thread it through the hole and then solder from the top. I find that a little bit too difficult, solely because of the fact that once you tin this wire and try and put it through that hole, it ain't gonna happen. I mean, even the red wire, oh man, it's tight, but I could possibly get that one through. Maybe. Regardless, not my preferred method. My preferred method is going to be to solder directly onto each of these terminals like so. And to do that, we're going to need to tin up the terminals themselves. We're going to come over here, tin up, heat up our main pad, and start to put a bit of solder onto it. Now what you're probably going to find with the negative pad is that you need to give it a tad more heat with the soldering iron, solely because the black is the earth and it disperses heat quite a lot more than what you might normally get. So try and get it flat with that terminal, flat with this pad, and then give it a bit more juice in there. Now we've got a nice big tinned up pad ready to go. I'm going to do the same on the positive terminal here as well. You won't need quite as much time on this one because it will heat up a lot quicker. Just like so. A nice big glossy blobbly finish. Love it. Get rid of that stuff. Cool. Now you're going to bring either your red or your black wire, whatever one you so desire. Oh, we're rhyming here too. You need to come from the back end here. Now, one important note is that you've got your insulation here. You don't want to be having your wire stripped all the way back and then potentially having it short circuit on this entire board here. So you want to make sure this little bit of insulation here goes all the way up to the very edge of the solder. So we'll come in here, red wire, heat the red wire, heat the red pad up, the positive pad. You may have to get it a little bit flatter for this. Go. And then might need a little bit more solder on that, you know. Heat this positive pad up, and then our wire goes beautifully into there, just like so. Now you've got a fantastically connected little red cable, little red lead, which is going to be going over to our capacitor shortly. Same thing with the black wire and the negative terminal. Come over here, heat it up. Make sure it's going right up to the edge. Beautiful. Cool. Those are your two. Oh, it's a little bit warm now. Yeah, be careful of that one. The entire ESC might be a tad warm. Those are your two. Now on the bottom, remember, those are on the bottom, not on the top. These are both of your cables, which are going to be running through to the back, which will then be coming onto your ESC cable here. Next up, we've got potentially the hardest solder of the entire day. And yet we do have to do this one first, but it is our battery cables or battery leads onto the ESC. So we're flipping the ESC back over onto the front now, and we're making sure that we tin the crap out of both of these terminals because we need plenty of solder on there, and then we'll also be applying some extra solder and flux to these battery cables in a second, you'll see. So again, heat it up. We're heating the surface up first, putting plenty of solder onto it. This was a mistake that I actually made at first when I was first building my first quad. I didn't put enough solder onto it, so it made life very difficult. And the same for the negative terminal here. Plenty of solder onto it. Very good. Very good. Okay, so for the most important and most difficult part, you're going to need to make sure you get this right. Red goes to positive, black goes to negative. And I'm going to start off with the positive terminal because it is the easiest. Come on here. Make sure that we're heating these wires up enough. I'm going to turn this up even a little bit more. Okay, that's mostly heated now. So again, I've made a similar mistake to how I did when I first started, and I just did not put enough solder onto this. So we need to add a bit more solder to this entire joint. So we can create a much better connection. This is the most important connection, remember guys. Nice, that's a very solid connection. So that's what we want. We want a solid connection. I'm going to add some extra solder. Grab our bit of blue tack. Going to add some extra solder to my black lead here as well. Make sure we've got substantial amounts on everything. Again, it might take a second for this to actually heat everything up. Come on. There we go. We got lots of solder on that one. Come down here to our black terminal, our negative pad. I'm going to heat it up. Heat up our black wire as well. Now this may come at a point where you might want to use tweezers because it does get quite warm, but it's not necessary if you don't have them. Cool, that is a nice solid connection there too. Beauty. That is now the hardest solder complete. So give yourself a congratulations if you've gotten this far and you haven't rage quit yet, because you've just done the most annoying solder, and this solder is actually one that took me probably about 30 odd minutes to do on my first ever drone. So keep that in mind. If it takes you 30 minutes, don't feel bad. It happened to me as well. So we're good. For the moment, we're going to now unplug our soldering iron. Pop that one over to the side. Make sure you don't burn yourself on this. I'm going to recommend you put it well out the way, because if you accidentally touch that now, it's going to hurt. And yeah, don't let it hurt. It's going to suck for you. Putting that away. I'll solder away for now with our blue tack. Just popping it all over and out to the side. Why, you may be thinking? Because we're about to get onto another extremely exciting part. We're going to come over here, grab our drone frame, come back to our box, grab out our 4 motors, and if you bought it, the TPU as well. Pop that one back over to the side again. And this is where things really start to take place now, okay? This is where things get hella exciting. So, we kind of come over here and gracefully open up each of our motor boxes. It's going to come with 4 screws and a hex nut as well. These 4 screws aren't actually long enough for this thick drone frame, but we'll get to what happens with that in a second. Keep them, don't get rid of them. The box, or you can get rid of that. So again, another box, another part, there we go. Grab that, don't need the box. And another one. Man, it's like Christmas opening all this stuff. It's so much fun. Gotta love it. Grab those ones, put that there, get rid of that. And then out of your TPU package, if this is what you bought, you're gonna grab these little bits. These are your little motor covers. They add a little bit of pizzazz to everything, a little bit of, I don't know, just pizzazz, bit of bling. Okay, so you know how I was mentioning about these screws. What we can do is, let's just open one of them up for now, pop them all out, don't need the plastic. You're gonna grab these 4 screws, and like I said, they're not long enough to get through this frame and into the motors. What you're gonna do is put them over here to the side and swap them out with these 4, or 4 of these, from your frame kit. Fantastic. make sure you keep them because we need them to secure more stuff on the frame later. But we're going to use these to secure the motors. So, first motor, I'll put this all to the side. Flip the drone over, grab your little TPU cover if you've got one, and you can sort of wedge that on over here. Clips on through. If you don't have one of those, all good. You don't need it. You can just skip that stage. Gonna come over here, grab our motor. You're gonna see we've got 4 screw holes on this, and we've also got 4 holes on this here. And believe it or not, it sits perfectly in there like so. There's not much else to it. What you do need to do is line them up, grab a screw, pop it in, and then find a little motor hole in there. Like so. Do that 4 times over, my friends. And you'll see that you don't want to tighten them up fully just yet. You want to use the general rule of put them all in very loosely at first, and then tighten them up on a diagonal across from each other. So I'll show you what I mean. Oh my goodness, I'll show you what I mean in a second. So they're loosely in. This one here is also loosely in. And now that they're all loosely in, I'm going to tighten up this one, then this one, because 1, 2 opposite, then this one, then this one. So diagonally opposite to each other. So tighten this one here up. Not super, super tight, but tight enough. 1, 2, 1, 2. That is now a secured motor onto your drone frame. How cool is this looking now? So we're going to do the exact same thing with the other 4. And I'm just going to put another TPU bracket over here. Go, pop over. Beautiful. Grab another motor. Again, doesn't matter which motor. We're going to be figuring that side of things out a little bit later in the video, which is pretty exciting as well. Over here. Grab these screws, because these ones we're using. So we're using, again, more screws from the rest of the frame kit instead of the ones that come with the motors. But again, keep the ones from the motors, please. You need them. Don't just throw them out. I only say that because I really don't want somebody to throw them out. That would just suck. Pop them in here. Now it's funny, I've actually never used these Zing motors before, but from what I've heard, well, I just lied to you completely there. I have got a pre-built FPV drone, which is the iFlight Nazgul Evoke. That drone has got these motors on them, but I've never built a drone with these motors on them. So, I'm excited to see how they come back out. Again, little recap here, we're going to be using the diagonal rule. 1, 2, then 1, 2, okay? Let's go tighten, tighten, other angle, tighten, then tighten. Epic. Look at that. Solid. Now, one thing to note, and it's going to be very, very difficult for you to see. This little bit in here, though, you don't want this screw to come through too far that it's going to hit the bottom of your motor. If you do that, you're going to screw things up. So if you're using not this kit and you're using some different motors, some different size screws, keep that in mind. It's pretty important. You don't want to completely mess up your build before even getting to fly it, because that would be a sad time. So, come over here. 4 screws from the rest of the kit. Not the ones that came with the motors. How many times should I say that? 4 times? That makes sense. Anyways, pop one in. Another one here. In.
And then yet another one in here. Yeah, I hope you guys right now are having actually quite a bit of fun, because the feeling of just putting together your own drone can't be bought. This is genuinely an experience that you just have to curate for yourself. You have to make happen yourself, because without it, you're going to be, well, you're just going to be buying drones. And I think buying drones is a great place to start for a lot of people, especially if you were anything like I used to be and just get frustrated at this sort of stuff. Whoop. Because yeah, I used to get frustrated, and I probably would have just given up on FPV if I'd tried to build first. But if this is your first time ever building an FPV drone, this is the first thing that you've ever done, like for FPV, aside from maybe a simulator or something, kudos to you. You are excelling fantastically, much more than I ever did. Yeah, the fact that you're building your first drone, and even if you've already bought a drone, you're still building your first drone, kudos to you as well, because, well, quite frankly, building a drone is a task in itself to even consider doing. Kind of just talking a whole bunch of waffle right now whilst I'm screwing these in, so I do apologize. Turn that there up. And pop that one there and two. Beauty. Last thing is the diagonal maneuver. Got one. Turn the other side. Two. Turn this bit. Three. And four. Holy hecka. Look, I mean, okay, yeah, it looks a little unusual, but look how cool that looks. Look what you've done so far. Fantastic. I'm stoked for you. I'm going to put all of these, open them, and put them all to the side. You don't need to put your little nuts on top of your motors just yet. Keep them off to the side as well. And obviously, we're going to need to keep all of these screws, because I only mentioned that 4 times. So here's a 5th time. Keep the damn screws. There we go. One. And the last pack here. Beautiful. This is where the fun begins now, because we're making things so they can't actually come off the quad after this. Well, you can, just you're going to have to unsolder things now if you want them to move. What we're doing is we're securing the ESC onto the drone now by soldering on our motor wires. Now, what you'll see, there are 3 wires on each motor here. And what happens is these 3 wires come in here and they go onto 1, 2, 3. Don't worry about the order, just try your best not to cross these over so we're not all twisted up like this and trying to solder on like that. That's not best practice. Best practice is to make sure that they're all sitting nice and flat along here, and you got the 2 options here to either come around and solder down onto those 3 pads, which creates a very clean look. Or the other option is to just come straight along to the side here and simply solder directly onto the outside. If you do that, you do risk having things catch onto the drone from the outside. So I'm going to recommend that you don't do it this way, and instead you wrap it around and come in here. But if that doesn't feel quite up to your skill level, perfectly fine to just do these front ones for now. So as much fun as it would be just to solder these straight on and leave the wires dangling everywhere, doesn't work like that. What we're going to be doing is I'm just going to get rid of these wires for now so they're not all in my way. And you over here. Cool. What we're going to do is we're going to have to shorten these wires so that they're not dangling around everywhere. Now you are going to have to be, for this particular tutorial, I'm going to show you going around the back. Again, if you're not confident, you go around the front, you can be less precise with things and it's going to be okay. But if you want to be a little bit more tidy, a little bit more neat as well, coming around the back here and coming into these, you're going to have to be more precise with where you cut your insulation up to, because you don't want to short it onto this backboard here. That's an important thing. We really don't want to short things out, because I've done that before. That's how I lost my first ever drone build. It's not fun, okay? It's not fun whatsoever. So one thing I forgot to mention is a little bit of insulation tape at the start as well. So for this bit, we're gonna need to grab this insulation tape. Just take a little bit off. Make sure everything's sitting rightly. Wow. Make sure everything's sitting right, which is basically our ESC right here. Bring these wires up. Keep them nice and flat. Grab a bit of E-tape and slap it around like this. We can tidy this up a little bit later. Right now, however, this is just to hold these wires in place whilst we are soldering with them. So they're all nice. What we can also do is come around and find, where is my blue tack? I've lost my blue tack, guys. This is outrageous. Okay, we're good. You need a bit of blue tack here, and this can be really, really helpful for, say, when you have your wires here. You just want to pop this here, grab this, and just like, there you go. You can solder in there now. You get what I mean? It makes a bit of sense. I'm going to use that shortly. But for the moment, what we do need to do as well is tin things up. Let's grab our little soldering iron, pop it over here, grab our cable, pop that in, connector up, and boost this up to about 350. That should be about right. So whilst this is heating up, we can grab our solder. What we're going to be doing in this step is coming in through here and tinning up each of these pads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 pads for 12 motor wires. Okay, we've got a bit of heat in here. So again, you want to make sure you put enough solder onto these. You're not going crazy, but you're putting definitely enough on there, because that's the biggest mistake that I made, was not having enough solder and my connections just were not solid. That's one. Beautiful. Two. Beautiful. That's 3, 4, 5, 6. So far we've got 6 pads, all tinned up, all soldered up. Well, not soldered up, just tinned up. Come over here. Beauty. Now that we've got all of our little pads here, all tinned up, ready to go, we need to cut our wires and then make sure that these are also going to be tinned up and ready to go. So you do want to give yourself a little bit of slack here, but we're also not talking like huge amounts of slack either. And this absolutely is all going to come down to your perceived skill level, how much you actually think you're going to be able to do and how easily you think you're going to be able to do it. If you aren't that confident, but you still want to give the neat way a try, I just simply recommend cutting them a tad longer, and it makes your life a little bit easier. So, only coming in more or less about here. And I'm going to cut about there. You're going to notice that they're all going to be slightly different in length because they all go to slightly different areas of the frame, which is fine. You can come here. Again, you can actually use your fingernail for this. Just pull off a little bit. You don't have to necessarily always spin the old, what are they called? Wire snips around it. Depends if you have fingernails or not. Thankfully I do right now, which is an upside. Cool, so once you've stripped that insulation off, give these each a bit of a twist up. Make sure that make sure no little wires are going to go places, because that's how we short things out nice and easily. You can see these are all pretty short to be able to go onto these here. That one there might even be a tad long, so I'm actually just going to snip it a little bit and just get rid of that additional wire that I don't want. Very good. Cool, so the tinning up stage. This is where you can grab your blue tack, which, may I mention again, is very, very handy. I'm just making sure it gets extra sticky by moving it around a little bit and giving me some extra stickiness back. So this is where you can just pop it on here, grab your 3 wires, like that, and now look how simple this is going to be. Come over here, grab soldering iron with a little bit of solder, and just tin these wires up. Nice. 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 Cool. So each of those have now been tinned up. And this is where we get to finally attach our motor wires, onto the quad. I wouldn't worry about which wire you're putting to which of these, because we're going to configure that later on down the track. But do try your best not to cross any of the wires over to each other. Yeah, you ideally just want to make sure they all kind of flow quite nicely around with each other, which is the ideal situation here. So this is a nice place for those tweezers, because otherwise you're going to burn your fingers, and trust me, I did that plenty of times and it's no fun, so don't recommend it. Coming down here, just going to simply solder that on. That is a nice solid connection, which is exactly what we're after. The caffeine's kicking in this morning. My hands are shaking like crazy. And the nerves are probably up a little bit too. Like, it's completely okay to have a little bit of nerves on this whole thing. Kind of adds to the fun of it, you know. Just figure out what's, my goodness, I need to burn myself. Figure out what's going to work best for you. Two. Three. Make sure they're all solid. That one is definitely not. Oopsies. This one actually might need a little bit more solder, you know? Put a bit more solder on there. And then bring it back over. Oh, that's because this wire did not get tinned properly. There's actually no solder on the wire. That's not very helpful. The importance of tinning, guys. Beauty. So, did I just create an absolute work of art? Absolutely not. Does it look a whole lot better than it could have if I went straight up that way? Absolutely. So that is a fairly decent, not fantastic, but fairly decent way to go with this. And all of these connections here are nice and glossy. They're covered with solder. It's the best thing you want for a complete connection. Let's do the same thing with the other three after a sip of caffeine. All right. Grab a little bit of E-tape. Coming over here, make sure these are all nice and flat coming over here. Pop out your tape down. And just wrap it on around. Again, we can redo these a little bit later on, so don't stress too much about the neatness of it right now. I'm going to bring all of these around, like so. Hold them there, grab my snips. One there. Two there. Three there. Beauty. Come up here. Where is my blue tack? Honey, where is my blue tack? You guys know the reference from Incredibles? No? Fair enough. Maybe I'm just old school now. We're going to get rid of a little bit of our insulation. Beauty. Give them a tad of a twist. Then we're going to properly solder all of the connections this time, unlike the last time I just did, because I didn't tin them correctly last, so we're going to make sure I tin all of these correctly this time. A little bit too much solder on that one. Beauty. Those are all tinned up fantastically. I see a little tiny wire down here. I'm just going to push back up. What you don't want is you don't want any little wires sticking out around the place, because otherwise those are what's going to short things out and cause you a whole bunch of grief later down the track. Now, let's make sure we're not crossing wires here over again. Come around. We want to grab our tweezers. I find, weirdly enough, I am right-handed, but flipping the drone over and holding the soldering iron in my left hand and controlling everything with the tweezers makes my life a little bit easier. So it's a lot of trial and error on these things. You just want to make sure your connections are super, super solid. Oh, look at that. And it should be easy. Like, it really should be super flippin' easy. If you're struggling, you probably haven't got enough solder. That's probably my biggest piece of advice I learned from the first time building. Cool, 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 cool. I am happy as with all of those. We have done 2 out of 4. Yay! This time, we'll really try not to mess up the tinning stage. I can't promise it, but I'd like to. We're going to grab our E-tape. Put it to the side. Bring it over to here. Tape it down. Beauty. Bring it up and around, making sure these all stay nice and flat, like so. We'll cut them all down, just like that. Okay, we're going to strip each of those down again. Nice. 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 Oh, maybe a little more. There we go. Going to twist, twist, twist. Make sure that we've got all those twisted up. What I've just noticed is one of my last solder joints does just look a little bit too long for my liking, and it just needs to be pressed forward a little bit. So I'm just gonna resolder a little bit further in and forwards, and that will be hopefully not going to cause any issues now. Who knows if it would have caused any issues, but I'd rather play it safe than later down the track being like, oh my god, yay, I don't know why that's not working. Possibly the same with that one, but that one's actually okay. Need a little solder. Need a little more solder on there. There we go. All right. Cool. I'm much happier with that now. So that was just a simple little fix-up. All I had to do was make sure that it could go a little bit further forward. I'll show you what that looks like now. So now that there looks just a little bit closer to the edge, which is what I wanted. Now I don't have to worry about it shorting out later on down the track at all. Right, let's do the good old tinning stage, which so far I've messed up twice somehow. Let's try not do that again. No promises though. Basically, the biggest piece of advice I can give for tinning wires is to make sure you're putting the solder onto the wire itself and not onto the solder tip to actually get it to bond onto or to stick onto your actual wire. So if you heat the wire up enough that the solder melts directly into the wire, then that's what we're aiming for here. All those look solid to me. So I'm going to make sure I've got enough solder on each of these. There's actually one terminal that I believe I need a tad more solder on before we go ahead. So I'm going to come through there, add a little bit more solder to that terminal. Add a tad more solder to all the terminals, because why not? And I think it's extremely important that you guys understand you don't have to get this right the very first time. You can go back, you can do things up again, you can make it all right, and then, yeah, don't feel like you have to get this right first time. I have done this. This is, well, look, put it this way. This is not my first, I just touched the solder. This is not my first time, and I am still making mistakes, so it's perfectly fine. Cool, so we'll solder each of these. Screwed that one up a little bit, that's okay. I would almost be willing to say that needs a little bit more solder. Oh, yeah, it did. Honestly, sometimes all it needs is a little bit extra solder, and then it just comes out beautifully. And that's what we're after. A beautiful connection here. Oh, just like that. God damn, that was a beautiful one. It's really satisfying when you start to get it right. Who would have known? That one wasn't as satisfying. It was good, but it wasn't as satisfying. Each of those connections are nice and glossy. I'm happy with how they all look. That leaves us to one finale of a motor to solder onto the board. Let's come in here, grab these wires, make sure they're all looking beautiful. But they're going to be annoying, this one, for some reason. It's always the last one that they're going to annoy me. And just, there we go. Good enough for the meanwhile, just to hold it in place. Pop that over, out the way for a second. And come up and around with all 3 wires. And snip them. Alright, same as before. Strip off that insulation on the ends. Just that little bit. Looks awesome. Give them a little twist up. A little twist up. And a little twist up. The twist up just allows the wires to not fray out and short stuff out later on down the track. Okay. Blue tack. Smack it on. Tin these bad boys up. Soldering iron. Solder. And, of course, solder them. So you can see there, I heated the wire up enough for it to actually tin itself first. And that was a big old blob of solder that just kind of exists on there right now. Don't think I want that. Leave me alone. Leave. Leave. Thank you. There we go. There's a big old blob of solder there too. Then the final one is in the middle. Beauty. Okay. You know what time it is? Time to grab our 3 wires, pull our blue tack off for the last motor wires to put on for now. Very exciting, very exciting. The last motor wires. Going to come in here with the left hand. Grab my little tweezers. I'm going to start off with the closest. Again, head's in frame, I apologize. And make sure that's going to go on nicely there. Oh yeah, you bet that was a good connection. And look what I've done. I've crossed the wires, so I'm going to undo that one. This one needs to go in here. And this little guy needs to come under and out that side. Cool. Okay, fantastic work. You have gotten so damn far already. You're going to make sure that all of these little solder joints here are looking, oh, don't do that. That all of these solder joints here are looking fantastic. Just make sure that they're all looking good. Don't worry if they don't. Just go in and just resolder them a little bit. It's fine to just not be perfect first time round, okay? In fact, it's fine to just never be perfect and have to redo these things later on down. Not like later down the track, but instead, more so get it done now, get it right now, just retry now, and then you don't have to do anything later on and you just know everything's looking beautiful. So the last thing to finish off this ESC layer here is going to be these 2 little wires here. Now these ran to our terminals at the back and these go to our capacitor here. Now our capacitor is going to be sitting up the front here next to our camera, which is going to be great. And what we're going to do is use a little bit of blue tack to secure this in place for now. The blue tack's going to allow a little bit of movement, which is what we want, but it's also going to make sure that not only can we actually take it off afterwards, but we can properly secure it down later, and if we screw up at all, then that's okay. Now, there is a negative and a positive on each of these legs here. The short leg on the capacitor, this little guy, is negative. Thankfully on this, we have a big negative label here. On a lot of capacitors, you don't. So if your capacitor doesn't, for whatever reason, short leg is negative, long leg is positive. For us, you can see the negative label. That's great. Again, black is negative, red is positive. What we're going to do is, instead of just trying to solder straight onto these very, very long legs, I'm going to grab this capacitor, going to push it down into place here, like so. I've left it a little bit back from the stack so that we can actually maneuver things around. And then you're going to see that these cables are going to be run onto this like so. And we will sticky tape that down soon. Don't worry, we'll get there in a moment. But you're also going to need to grab 2 other parts from your little consumables pack. And in here, we'll be grabbing 2 pieces of heat shrink. Now, don't stress that one is not black and one is not red. We've just got 2 reds, and these are going to go sliding both down the wires before you solder anything. So, pop both of them down there. Beautiful. That's what we want to see. So I'd slide them back pretty much as far as you can, because otherwise you might melt them onto the wire when you're heating them up to put onto the capacitor. But this is where things get a little interesting. What you're going to do with this is you're actually going to fold these legs down a little bit. Now you don't want to snap them, okay? But we do want to fold them down. So we are going to be soldering straight onto these points here. Now what's going to happen is we're going to come in here and we're going to need to cut each of these capacitor wires, or the wires that are running from our ESC to our capacitor. And these are both going to come off quite a bit shorter, which is lovely. And now we're going to come in and strip each of them a little bit. Remember, you don't need to strip them much, just a little bit. Get a little bit of that insulation off. Twist them up. And yeah, you're going to guess it. I'm going to do some tinning here. Blue tack. Blue tack, smack. Onto there. Tin these bad boys up. Now make sure you don't spend too much time tinning those ones, because if you do, you probably will melt your heat shrink on there too much, and well, if you melt your heat shrink, then you're not going to move it, which is not what we want. So, next thing you need to do is you're going to need to actually cut your little wires, or your little, whatever you want to call these, the legs. These are called the legs. You're going to need to cut your legs back so that you can actually solder these straight on like this. And for that, I'm cutting back to here and here. Beautiful. Now I'm going to add a little bit of solder to each of the legs of said capacitor. Make our life a little bit easier. Beauty and beautiful. I'm going to bring it in here. I'm going to grab my black wire, make sure it's going to the black, the negative on our capacitor. I'm just going to solder those two together. You're not going to need much solder for it. It's going to be an all good connection. Now, I've just seen a mistake that I've made, and I don't know how we're going to fix it, but we'll see. What I've done is we're still okay. But this heat shrink has certainly shrunk up quite a lot since I started the process of soldering there, and that's because I just spent a little bit too long trying to solder that red wire on. So see how the black, or the negative side does go on a lot easier. The red one is still wiggling up, and I can just get it over, so we're okay. I think, hopefully. Got a bit of red heat shrink here. I'm going to have to try and wiggle it up a little bit more. Not an ideal situation for myself here, guys. Hopefully you haven't done the same. And if you have, it's okay. Believe it or not, it's not actually the end of the world. Maybe it is for me. This is it, guys. I'm done. There we go. Just like that. Pulled it on up. Now we've got 2 pieces of heat shrink beautifully intact there. And we can actually fold them down a little bit again now too. You go 1, 2. Tuck them off to the side. Perfect. Now, if you don't actually have a heat gun, which you wouldn't if you bought this pack, what we can do is just use the tip of our soldering iron here. Let me get the solder off of it. To gently heat up this heat shrink and actually shrink it down. Of course, if you have a heat gun, this would be 20 times easier. So for now, we're just going to leave this without any 3M tape on it, any double-sided tape, and just a little bit of blue tack, just sticking that down like that. Congratulations, your ESC layer is completed, which is exactly what we're after. Now is going to be the perfect time to come into here. This is out of your ESC and flight controller accessories. You're going to grab the nice short cable here. Don't grab the long cable. The short cable. And you're going to see a tiny wee little plug right here. This goes into that. So the way that this one goes in, you're going to see there is some slightly exposed terminals and then some like nice flat side on this. We're going to take the slightly exposed and face them up. And then wiggle that cable in. Very simply, just sits in there. Easy as, which is what we like, right? A little bit of easiness. How good is this drone looking, guys? Look what you've done so far. This is fantastic work. I'm very proud of you. Well done. So our next stage moving forward is actually just going to be to test that everything here is working. Now, the best way you can do this is by using one of these things. And what is this? This is a smoke stopper. It pretty much does what you would expect from the name. And it stops smoke by limiting certain amounts of current, and will give you an alarm if anything is off. So what we're going to do is come in here, plug this right on in, and this is basically going to test us out for shorts on the ESC. If there is an issue, this here is going to alarm. If there is no issue, we should see a few lights pop up. Let's hope for the latter. That's what we wanted to hear. Nothing shorting out, and we got a toot toot toot. And we got our light come on. Perfect. That's a great sign. That means we shall now continue onwards and continue with the build, which now takes us on to yet another exciting step. We're now going to be bringing our flight controller board into things. So this is where things might look a little bit confusing, and there are a whole bunch of pads here, and yeah, it can get a little confusing, but basically it just means there's a lot of options and a lot of ways that you can, in theory, in future, add things on, take things off, whatever you really want to please, right? So this diagram here is going to be showing you basically where things go. So you've got where the FPV camera is going into, where the ELRS receiver is going into, and where the VTX is going into. Now, there is a very, very, very helpful little diagram that we've actually got that I'm going to be using as well to make sure that we know where each of our little pads are that we're going to be tinning. So we'll move the drone to the side for a second, and we're going to take a look straight on into this little pad. We're going to need to heat up our soldering iron again. just like that. Now that that's getting going. Okay, so for this one, we've actually got a bit of a side view here so that you can really see what we're looking at, because damn, these little guys are tiny. So what we're going to be working with is 1, 2, and 3. Those 3 are all going to be for the camera module. So that's the actual camera. Then down this side, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. And those are all going to be going onto the ELRS receiver. And then on the other side over here, we've got a little 5-volt one right there, and then a ground, VTX, and a T1. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth into what all of these different ones can do in this tutorial, because I just don't think it's worth trying to wrap your brain around that right now. But the basis of things is just to know where we're going. Okay, so we're going to come over here, and we're going to start off by tinning each of our pads. So for that one, we've got a 5-volt. You don't need much solder for these little guys. Keep that in mind. We've got a ground pad. Beautiful. We've got the camera pad. Beautiful. Over this side, we're going to now go onto the ground. The 4V5 pad. The R2 pad. And the T2 pad. Beautiful. Spin it over to the other side here. We're going to come and look at doing the 5-volt pad, which is just below the D in the Speedy B there. We'll come in there and we'll put a 5-volt. Just like that. Then we're going to go onto the ground pad. So that's the one that's just slightly down to the right. Turn that bad boy up. The VTX pad next to it. And then the T1 pad next to that. Great, so now that all that stuff's tinned up, we are now able to bring back our drone here. We're going to be placing this so that the camera, this is for the camera plug, and this here is for the ESC to flight controller. So this is our ESC, this is the cable that goes from the ESC to the flight controller. So this little AJM plug needs to be facing backwards like that, so that can plug into there. Don't plug that in just yet, we'll get to that in a moment. What we do need to look at now is actually putting our standoff onto here, which, if you don't know what standoffs are, these little guys are our standoffs. So what these allow you to do is space out basically the drone. That's literally it. You space the drone out. So you can notice that you've got 4 shorter ones from the Source 1 kit and 4 longer ones, right? The 4 longer ones are for, you guessed it, the lower part and the front. So those ones can go sit to the side for now. I'm also going to, good habit of unplugging the soldering iron and putting to the side. So we're going to put, you guessed it, 4 standoffs onto our drone. So we're going to go 1, 2, and we're going to use these small bolts that we had from the motor screws, or bolt screws, whatever you want to call them. My bad if I've been getting the terminology wrong this whole time. Pop that in there, and then just screw that on. Do it up as tight as you kind of can. These are fairly slippery things, so good luck getting it too tight. Same with the next standoff. Pop that in and just screw that one down. So we're using the bolts from the motors here. Then the next one goes at the very far end over here. So we're not doing these big holes. These ones aren't for it. We've just got the standoffs going into these. Yeah, this one and that one. Pop Pop that in there. Screw it down. Oh man, this one is not wanting to get screwed down without a bit of a fight. Oh, that one would be okay for now. And the final standoff for this side, go on here. Great. You've got the 4 standoffs on here now. They're all pretty solid. What we can do is just kind of tuck this out the way for a moment. Now, we're going to be grabbing our VTX out. So, we grab this little VTX out. That's this little guy. And then we come into the little accessories in the bottom. Here we go. And you're going to want to find this particular one. Now, you want this one, not this one, because that one's not going to get you as much range as putting an actual full-blown SMA antenna. SMA is literally just the way that the connection is. I can't remember what this one's called, but it's not that one anyways. So, get this, pop this stuff to the side for now. And we're going to also come into our little pack of goodies, our TPU pack, and we're going to grab this little bad boy out. Now what this is going to do, this is going to be able to mount your little SMA connector on there. So, you don't want to face it down, you want to face it up, and it just simply slides on the top like so. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these nuts off here, and you can see there's a couple. There's a little split washer. There's a few things on there. We're going to slide it through, grab our nut, and thread that back on there, and give it a good little tighten down. Great. So now that we've got that, we're going to pop our VTX here, which again comes in 2 parts. We're going to want to make sure that is together, just like that. You're going to see there is a little plug on this side that looks like it's going to fit our antenna here. And there's also a plug on this side. And this one is what we're going to plug this little cable in from. So this here is our pigtail. Now, this came out of, where is it? The VTX box, okay? Do not use the pigtail that's in this box over here. Don't use that one, okay? This was with the flight controller. We're not using that. We're using the pigtail that comes straight out of the VTX box. So what we're going to do, come in here, plug that little bad boy right on in. I think I got it around the wrong way. I did. Beautiful. Make sure it's a nice snug fit. Quite nice and simply. Then, we're going to pop this under here, and we're going to find 2 zip ties. Now that we've got our zip ties handy, we're going to come and grab this little bad boy. We're going to plug the antenna right on into the VTX itself. There you go. Nice, satisfying snap on there. Then we're going to grab our cable ties here and thread them through the bottom hole, over the top, down through the second hole, and then, you guessed it, in through the loop. And then do that up. Pretty damn tight, but nothing crazy. Look at that. Beautiful. Grab your snips. Leave a tad on there. Snip it off. Same thing again. Up to the bottom. Don't get your battery leads in it. Back and pull it on through. And then zip tie back down as well. Just like that. Lovely. Snip it. Beautiful. Pop them to the side. Your VTX is now secured on, which is what we like. This is where we're going to grab our antenna here. We might have to wrap it around the battery lead. Oh, wrong way. We might need to wrap it around the battery lead to make it fit. So this is future me here. I've actually completed the rest of the build, but to not confuse you guys, this here, your battery leads need to come up out the top here, because when this plate eventually goes on at the top, these sit out this way and connect up. So make sure it's coming out the top, don't let it run out the bottom. Continue on now. And then slide this antenna piece down just like so. This doesn't need to sit all the way down at the bottom, so we're good, it just sits up the top there. That is all looking nice and tidy. Next up, we're going to grab these little wires, which are going to go to these little pads right here. Now, there is a wiring diagram that is much easier to follow than just trying to figure this out, but we're going to swap over to the other camera angle so you can get a much closer look at what we're doing. Okay, so what we got here is this red wire is our 5 volt. This black wire is our ground. The yellow wire goes to our VTX, and then the green wire, come here, the green wire goes to the T1 there. Now, these cables are significantly too long, but what we want to do before you cut them is give them a little twist around so they're not going to get super, super messy, and we keep them nice and tidy. And then we kind of look, okay, let's cut them right about there would make sense. Come in here, give them a little snip. Easy peasy. Then keep them twisted up as much as kind of possible. The more twisted, the neater they are going to be. But at the tops, you're going to want to come through, get rid of the tiniest little bit of insulation over it. Right, so make sure that these little wires are not fraying, because that is not going to be helpful if they are, and I'm going to make sure they're also not too long. So basically you want all of these guys here to have as little, and I mean as tiny amount as possible, so that they can just fit onto each of these pads without shorting out and going onto any other pads there. And to do that, we're going to break out, you guessed it, the trusty blue tack. So I'm going to pop my blue tack there for a sec. Grab all my little wires here. Now, I want you to keep in mind, this is fiddly, okay? Yes, this is fiddly, this is hard, and I don't want you to underestimate yourself here. It's possible, it's just gonna take a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and it might feel a little bit annoying for a little bit. It does get my nerves going, put it that way. Right. Okay, so if you remember from before, where we're running these, give them a little twist up, all right, make sure they're all nice and twisted, nice and neat. And this is the fiddly stage. I'm going to start off with green, and green goes to the TX area. Not a very solid connection right now. Okay, we got green to T1 right now. We're going to take yellow next and run that to VTX. Great, yellow is now connected to VTX. Nothing is shorting in there. Black needs to go to ground. Very nice. And then red needs to go to, you guessed it, the 5 volt pad. Beautiful. So we just want to take a real quick look here and make sure that nothing is touching between any of these, that we've got any excess of solder going random places, because we don't want to short any of these little bad boys out. After a nice close inspection, it doesn't look like anything is off. So that's great. Obviously, these could have been a tad tidier if I really tried hard, but that is tidy enough for the moment. The big thing to realize here and make sure of is that your insulation is running right up to your 5-volt solder joint, because if it's not, it's probably going to end up touching behind, and we don't want it to be touching behind there. So that now means your VTX is officially hooked up to your flight controller, which is freaking awesome. That means that basically any camera feed that this flight controller gets is now going to pump it out via that VTX straight to your goggles. But we're not there just yet, okay? Don't get too ahead of ourselves here, all right? Now we're going to grab our ELRS module. So this little bad boy is called the RX. So RX stands for receiver. On your controller, you have a transmitter. So it transmits from the controller to the drone, and this is what receives it and inputs your controller's stuff into the drone and actually, gets it to control itself. So this is great. We love this, but it's also flippin' tiny, isn't it? So we've got these tiny, tiny little terminals here that we're going to need to put some cables onto. And you're like, well, where the heck are the wires that we're going to use? We're going to wander right on over here. You know that pigtail that I told you don't use for your VTX before? Yeah, well, we're going to grab that out and we're going to borrow this one because, we're being useful here, guys. We're going to utilize everything that we have. So from this, we're going to cut it. And we'll cut it, we'll give ourselves full length there. So we'll get rid of the connector. We're looking for black, red, white, and yellow. Now there are 2 other ones there that we don't want. That's cool. That's no worries. What we'll do is we'll just cut these right here as well. Great. So you can now discard of that over to the side. We're not going to need that. What we do need is these 4 little wires here. So again, we have got black, white, red, and yellow, okay? And each of those are going to go onto this little guy. So for now, let's take the drone, pop it over to the side again, get our blue tack. Blue tack's going to come in ridiculously handy here. And we're going to blue tack this tiny little thing down. Make sure it's going to stay there. Now, something very important to do here is not forget this little clear piece, okay? Now, what this clear piece does is saves your quad from getting lost, I promise you. What happened is I didn't put heat shrink, this is clear heat shrink, over the top of my my RX when I built my first quad. And that caused a massive short, which then made my quad go into failsafe and disappear off into the wilderness, and I eventually found it after many, many hours of searching. So, keep this out, you're gonna need it, don't forget it, all right? Don't forget it. Don't forget it. Right, so on this little bad boy, we have the RX on here, then you go over one, we have the TX on there, then you go over one more, we have the 5-volt on there, and then we have the ground here. So, let's start off with just peeling off a little bit of insulation, keep in mind it's only a little bit, off of our red and our black, our positive and negative, okay? And while we're at it, we're also just going to peel off a little bit from our yellow and also our white. Cool. Grab that soldering iron, start tinning things up. And come over here, and we're going to tin up this little board and wipe off our excess solder. And again, these are tiny, tiny little boards, so you're probably not going to need much heat for them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a little more salt on that one. Beautiful. That is the board itself tinned up. And then we also do need to try and tin up these little guys a little bit, just because it's slightly necessary. Yep, concentration mode came back on. I'm sorry, guys. I do try to run through things, but man, when we get to these small little wires, they get fiddly as, and I just need to focus on them, you know? And hopefully you guys are too. There we go. Okie dokie. Right on. We know what time it is now. We're going to go and start to put tiny little wires onto tiny little terminals. So we're starting off with the far end. This is the side with the antenna little point on it, okay? So our antenna is facing up right now, and we've got this little black box on the side closest to us. We're going to start off by putting our ground wire, which is our black wire here, onto the furthest point over here. So we'll pull this over here. Make sure we're not going to burn any wires. Take off any excess solder. Great. And we're now going to come in with our little tweezers here and grab our black wire. So this is our ground. Ground wire is now on. Next, we're going to grab our 5 volt. That goes onto the second one in here. The third wire that we're putting on is our yellow wire. And the yellow wire is our TX, so that's our transmitting bit. Our TX goes on there, just like that. Then white is the RX, and the RX goes onto the very end. Much like so. And we're going to have a close, inquisitive look here. Nothing is touching, which is what we want. And all connections look solid. Now, before we forget, we're going to grab all of these little wires here. And we're going to grab our little bit of heat shrink and slide it on over. Right on over until we get across the entire little VTX, the entire little RX here. And you make sure that your antenna is covered as well. So, come here. This is where we're going to grab our soldering iron again. And just kind of lay it on over. Not touching, just very close to it. And come on right on over the top here. And you'll see it slowly start to melt down as well. Now what's happening here is it's pretty simple. But the heat from the soldering iron, which is like 300 odd degrees, is enough to put off a little bit of extra heat and melt down our VTX on both sides. Oh, jeepers. We're not melting any VTXs. We're melting down the heat shrink here. And it does exactly as you'd want it to. Shrinks down. Beautiful. Don't do what I just did then and touch the edge. You don't want to melt it. Okay. That heat shrink is now over the top. And you know what that means? It means nothing can touch this and short out. So as a little recap of what your order should be here, if your antenna is facing up and facing you, you should have black to ground, red to 5 volt, yellow to TX, and white to RX. Now, this is where things are going to get a tad confusing, just a tad, and it's only because the TX, which is yellow, goes to the RX on our board. And the RX, which is white, goes to the TX on our board. So they go to the opposites. But ground and 5 volt go to ground and 5 volt. So keep that in mind, okay? And for these, we are not working with the camera one just yet. We are working right on over here. just before we go ahead and do this, let's plug in the ESC to our flight controller, which is just that little ribbon cable here. So this is the point where we can officially take that blue tack off of our little capacitor here, get on over to our consumables pack, grab ourselves a little bit of double-sided tape here, and we can actually cut ourselves a little bit, just a nice little square. Go here, and here, and this is going to be mounting our capacitor. So, we'll pop this right onto the bottom of capacitor, just like that. Very nice. Then we're going to try and kind of make sure we're pushing this into the right area, which is going to be here. It's going to be out the way. We'll peel off the second part of the double-sided tape here. Okay, then we're just going to pop our little capacitor right on there. And it fits nice and snugly. Yay! That's what we like. We're going to grab this, make sure the little antenna here is facing up. Just slide it down in there, and we're going to bring it right on there. That's pretty much where we want it to sit. So again, we'll grab another little bit of double-sided tape, snip that off. Grab it here. Pop it right there onto the back of our RX. Make sure it's nice and snug. Grab that tape off. Beautiful. Make sure the antenna is facing out. And snugly pop it in our little corner here. Just like that. So now you've got your little cables here. We're going to twist them around a little bit. And just like we did before, these are going to run to these four here. So you've got your T2, which your white receiver wire we're going to, your R2, which your yellow transmitter wire will go to, your 5 volt, which your red will go to, and your ground, which your black will go to. I truly believe it's probably worth mentioning to you guys that this is the most frustrating part of the build for me personally, just because it gets super fiddly and I get like frustrated because I can't quite get my fingers where I need them to go. So it's okay if you're feeling a little annoyed here. It does get to me as well, but I got you guys to keep me company, so we're going to be okay today. There we go. We've just snipped the RX wires here, so we've twisted, then snipped them, and then next we're going to do a little bit of tinning and also stripping just back the insulation that little bit. Okay, so we'll come in here, pop our blue tack on, and we're going to tin all of our tiny little wires here. Shouldn't need too much heat on them because they are tiny. Beautiful. Peel our blue tack back off. I just want to run you guys through again where things are going. So we're putting red to the 5 volt here. We're putting black to the ground over here. We're putting white, which is on the RX, our RX cable. That is going to the T2 cable, RX to T2. Then yellow, which is TX, is going to the R2. So TX to R2, okay? But let's start off nice and simple, and let's do ground first. So wiping off any excess stuff. making sure our wires have got a nice little bit of twist in them. And then we're going to grab them. So, ground to ground. Then we're going to grab 5 volt. Keeping in mind that 5 volt still goes to 5 volt. Right, then we're going to grab our yellow. Remember, yellow to R2. Pop that on there. Beautiful. And finally, white to T2. Just like that. Fantastic. Now remember, make sure you're checking these up. Make sure that they're not going to get in each other's way. Make sure there's no little bits of solder between each of them. Should all be nice and free in there. Now we get to do a really fun bit. I mean, holy heck, look how close we're getting to finishing this thing now. If we come over here, we grab our camera, pop the camera on out. Come on. Grab our camera, and we're also going to need to come to the camera accessories bit. Don't stress about this board. We don't need it, although it would be quite a bit of fun if we could figure out what it's used for. Oh my goodness, okay. You also don't need any spacers here, but what you do need is this little pigtail here, okay? So we need this and keep it now nice and wound up. It helps with a better signal when you're flying because it doesn't screw everything over. So we're going to grab 2 of these little screws. I'm going to pop everything else back over there. We don't need that right now. We're going to grab our 2 mounting brackets, which were from the kit itself. And you're going to have a look at this, and you can see that there's a whole bunch of different ways it could go. But this little smiley bit, the long curved bit, sits down at the bottom. So that's going to sit down like that, and this one is also going to sit down like that, facing the front. And what we're doing here is we're actually going to attach the camera into this hole right here, okay? That one. So for that, grab this little bad boy, pop it into that hole, come to the camera, make sure you got your plugs at the top. We're just going to pop the camera on. Don't need it too tight right now, we'll adjust it soon. Again, same thing on this side here. Spin that bad boy on. Cool, that's what we like to see. So this here will now pretty simply fit itself right on in there. Don't need to do that just yet. What we do need to find though is that little pigtail, this little guy, and we need to plug it in to the left hand side plug over here. So then once you got that plugged in, you're going to want to make sure it stays nice and twisted. It's going to come in through here and it's going to sit down right here and then plug itself up into the top here. So you want to make sure it's going to sit nice and it's going to seat itself nicely in there for cutting those wires. Measure it out to about there. Snip it. Boop. Beautiful. And then, yep, you guessed it. We're going to be soldering these 3 to their respective places. So you've got 5 volt being red, you've got ground being black, and then yellow is the cam one there. So it's 5 volt ground cam, which means red, ground, yellow. Pretty simple. We will shed off a little bit of insulation. Then we'll make sure these here stay nice and twisted for us. Lovely. So we're going to pop our blue tack on now. Grab each of the 3 wires back up. And you guessed it, guys, we are tinning it, because we love to tin things. Tin that one there up. Beauty. I don't think I tinned anything. There we go. Tinned. Tinned. And tinned. Cool. We have now officially tinned up each of our tiny little wires. So, again, pull off our blue tack for the final soldering of the day, guys. We're going to grab red. Red comes in here to 5 volt. One. Then we run black, which is ground. Ground comes in over here and onto the ground pad. And the final one, yellow, just like that. This now means that we can pull our cable down.
Holy moly. Look at that. Whew. That's exciting, guys.
We've now reached what might be the most nerve-wracking but most important stage of the entire build, and that is plugging a battery into it with a smoke stopper. I need to say, with a smoke stopper. We're hoping for that green light. That will make sure that we've got no shorts here, and that's exactly what we're after. So, let's give this a try. 3, 2, 1. Everything is exactly as we want it there, team. Green light, we heard the ESC startup, which was the do-do-do, and then we heard the flight controller talking to it, which was the dun-dun. So, fantastic news. We have just built a quad successfully with no shorts in it, which is everything we ever wanted. So we can now place this well out the way. This is what I would call the most rewarding stage, and it's kind of the finishing off. We got our battery plate. We got our main plate. And then we've also got our standoffs to put on. So let's start with the standoffs first. Come on over here. Grab a front standoff. These are the long ones, remember? You can screw that one there in. You can move your camera out the way if that makes your life a little bit easier. 1. 2. 3. 4. Nice. And of course, number 4, which is technically speaking number 8 on this entire quad. So we'll screw that one there in. Very swell, very nice. Grab our camera here again and carefully pop that back in between. Okay, so just before we can put this top plate on, we need to secure down our ESC and flight controller. And to do that, we have got 4 tiny wee little nuts in here. Ugh. Give me one more, there we go. There is a spare one in there, which is kind of nice, they always give you that. Now I can't recommend enough at this point in time as you're putting these on, not to use a tool. The amount of times now that I've had to replace an entire flight controller because I've used the tool and managed to scratch the board has been, I think we're onto our second or third flight controller now where I've had to do that. So I've learned the hard way to just use the fingers. Don't try anything special. It's really just not worth it in the long run. And finger tight is generally pretty damn secure enough anyways. So you should still be able to have a tad of movement in them, and that will just take out general vibrations and stuff as well. These don't need to be crazy tight. So I'm actually going to loosen them all off a little bit. There we go. We've got a tad of movement in them, and that's just going to allow for the vibrations from the motors not to interfere as much with the flight controller and ESC. So now we can move on to the top plate. We can pop that bad boy on, grab these little screws from over here, and you guessed it, start screwing it on down. Now make sure that your top plate is lining up with your two camera points up the top here, because otherwise that side doesn't have them for it to go into. So it actually won't go on that way. If you're trying and it's not going on, try flipping the whole camera plate around, the whole top plate around, and yeah, then you're probably going to be all good. There are 8 total screws here to put in. We've done 4 so far, and just remember these are all the motor screws that we're meant to be using for the motors, but they work perfectly for the frame here as well. Alrighty, pop this one here on. You're also going to probably have noticed that the ELRS, this little bad boy, the ELRS antenna here is still flimsying around. And yep, I'm going to show you just what to do with that in a moment. But I want to do all my screws up first. There we go. 2 more. Uno. And dos. Look at that, guys. You have just made a flippin' drone. Let's go. What we're going to do is come on over, grab your antenna, and you're going to pop that antenna right onto the back of your quad here. It's going to be beautiful. And one thing I have just noticed that I've actually forgotten to do is put our little bit of TPU here onto the bottom. Now I'm not putting the GoPro mount on the top yet, but if you were to, that's going to go right on up there like that. I'm not putting that on just right this very second, so I'm leaving that off to the side. But I do want to put my little front skid plate on, so I'm going to need to undo these two. Very nice. So we can grab our little antenna, which should just be kicking along the side of the arm here. I'm going to go to our little consumables pack, grab ourselves a zip tie. I'm going to zip tie him right in place here. Now what you don't want to do here is do this up too tight, because it might actually end up cutting the antenna, which, believe it or not, is not what you want. I'm going to tuck it in this way, and we're going to use 2 zip ties to do this. And then grab another one and come on right over here. We'll trim those 2 down, just like that. Now for the literal final stage of building your drone, which potentially is the most fun and enjoyable part, is putting your battery piece, this is your little battery grip, onto the drone itself. You're going to pop each of these little bad boys out, like so. Okay, don't need to worry about that just now. Pop this one here out as well. Now we get the fun part, making sure it's going on the right way here. Remember, this is exactly where this GoPro mount would go, so I'd make sure if you do have a GoPro mount that's going to fit on there absolutely fine. We get to peel off. Oh, that was so unsatisfying. Come on. There we go. Peel that off. And then come right on over the top here. Making sure I'm getting it nice and lined up. Pretty good to me. Get to push that all down. Oh, look at that. Beauty. Absolute beauty. Well done. You've just made an entire flippin' FPV drone. Now we've just got the fun part of programming it up, and it sounds more complicated than it is, trust me. I am no computer whiz, but this sort of stuff does make a lot of sense to me, and yeah, hopefully it's going to for you guys as well. Alright, so now that the entire build has been completed, we've got a bit of work to do within Betaflight. Now this whole step and this whole bunch of steps actually can come across a little bit confusing, but I'm going to break it down
briefly explain everything to you as we go through as well, so you get a bit of an understanding. Because when I first went through this, I had no understanding of what the hell I was doing, so there I was just clicking buttons and trying to follow tutorials, not actually knowing what I'm doing. So I'm going to explain it to you as we go through, and by the end of this, we're going to be able to take this bad boy out and fly it. Oh yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm excited to fly this, and this isn't even my first build. Can't even imagine how you guys would be feeling. Whew. So there are a few things you're going to need. Obviously, you're going to need to have your drone. You're going to also need a fully charged battery. Definitely make sure it's fully charged. You're going to be needing to monitor this as we go through for the rest of the video. We'll be using it. You're going to need your controller with ELRS built in if you're following this through. Otherwise, if for some reason you put Crossfire in, which is cool, just make sure you got a Crossfire receiver either built into your controller or put on like this. This here is an ELRS module. This here will be connecting my controller to the drone with that this little ELRS module, or this little receiver that we put on before. Then you'll also need a pair of goggles. Now these are the DJI HD goggles, and we've got an analog in here. So what you got to understand is that this here has been converted to analog. It's the only pair of analog goggles that I own. But if you just have a normal pair of analog, it's probably going to be an easier setup than these. But I'm going to use these as a demonstration because I've got these and it'll be simple to use in the meantime. So you'll need controller, goggles, battery with that, and of course a USB-C cable. Now the USB-C cable will plug right on into our flight controller here. This is a little bit of an iffy one sometimes, and it's really random. Sometimes I have cables that work for other things, and they are data cables, and then sometimes I have cables that don't work for other things, and they work perfectly with the drone. So what can happen with beta flight, which we're going to get into in a second, is that the drone will light up because it's getting powered, but it just simply will not connect to the computer. Who knows why? Bring a few USB-C cables, especially if you're on Mac. I've found there's more issues on Mac than there have been on Windows. So let's get right on into this. First stage is to be going and downloading Betaflight. Now, if you haven't downloaded Betaflight before, it's pretty simple. You head to their downloads page, go down to latest configurator releases, click on that, and then you're going to find which one is suitable for your computer. So for me, it is Mac OS, so we've got that here. I would click that, download that. I've already got it downloaded, so I won't be doing that now, but that's how you get Betaflight. Then we're going to head to Betaflight itself, open it on up. And this is the page that we have. This is the point where we grab our USB-C cable, we plug it on into the computer, and then we plug it on right on into the drone itself. Should see some lights pop on up here. That's great. And then ideally, woohoo, we're connected. That means that we can officially start our big fix up here, basically, our big getting everything ready. So we'll head to the setup page, which is here up the top, and you're gonna see you got a drone, which, look at that, it moves. Now you see this arrow on the screen here. It is right now in the correct orientation of where the front of my drone is. This should all be absolutely perfect, and you shouldn't need to do any different changes here because we put the flight controller facing forward. So it faces this way. All the movements of the drone like this are all shown on the screen. But anyways, first things first, we're gonna head up here to update firmware. Click on that. We're going to come here to auto detect, and we're going to click that. It's going to detect which one is our flight controller, which is the SpeedyBee 405V3. Fantastic. Then you're going to come here, and I would recommend choosing the most up-to-date version. Right now it is 4.4.3. And then you're going to head down to the bottom, hit load firmware, the online version, because we want that. Great. Now it's downloaded. Hit flash firmware. Should pop up. Okay, well, yep, I need to allow the connection between the drone. It's going to erase, and then, you guessed it, it's going to put a whole nice new, fresh firmware onto our beautiful drone. So it shouldn't take too long. It's a pretty quick process. Now, if anything does become a point of confusion at any point, just reach out to either myself or somebody within the community, and I promise you, these steps can all be explained over and over again, and you'll eventually understand it. But a big thing here is just to realize this is a decent process. There's a lot of learning to go into it. I'm going to simplify it as much as possible, and you're gonna understand it to a point where you can come into Betaflight very soon and just know what to do. But we're good. So programming successful, awesome. Hit connect up on the top right.
And then you're going to see it comes up with, there are custom defaults for this board available. Normally a board will not work properly unless custom defaults are applied. Do you want to apply the custom defaults for this board? Yes. Apply the custom defaults. Great. Don't worry about any of that stuff yet. You can hit close and then just double check again that everything here is matching up. So our up arrow is facing exactly how the drone is facing upwards there. Perfect. That's what we like to see. So we're going to head here to calibrate accelerometer. Make sure your drone is sitting nice and flat on a flat surface. Hit calibrate and it's going to basically level it out, make sure everything's perfect. Good, that's done. That was nice and simple. So you've calibrated the accelerometer. Then we're going to head over to the ports tab. Now, this ports tab is essentially telling Betaflight what components are connected to which UART on their flight controller board. So the UARTs are what we were working with before. This is where we plugged the VTX into the T1 little bit. And you remember the T1 tab, that is UART 1. Then we did the receiver to T2, and T2 is standing for UART 2. So we've got to tell Betaflight that we've connected those components, the VTX, the video transmitter, and the receiver, to those correct UARTs, and these are our UARTs right on the screen here. So UART 1, which is for our video transmitter, we connected that up to T1. We're going to head over here to peripherals on the edge, and we're going to select IRC tramp. That's for the VTX. That is the way that we are communicating, the way that our video transmitter is communicating with the drone. That's what IRC tramp is. There are other options. Choose IRC tramp. Then you're going to head down to UART 2. Now UART 2, we need to tell Betaflight that it was hooked up to our ELRS receiver. So for this, we've already got it selected here, which is great, but this little serial RX slider, this needs to be ticked, and then that's literally us. We've just told it, fantastic. Now keep in mind here, you want to leave UART 4 as is, just leave that because it's allowing Bluetooth and I think Wi-Fi connectivity from the SpeedyBee app, which SpeedyBee is the brand of our flight controller. That's allowing you to be able to connect up via Bluetooth straight to the flight controller, which we want. So leave that on there. Hit save and reboot. Cool. Now that we're saved and rebooted, we can head over to the configuration tab. So hit on here, and there's going to be a whole bunch of settings pop up. Don't stress about it. We're going to get everything sorted. The configuration tab is essentially everything that is being controlled within your flight controller. So the brains of your drone, that's what we're doing in here. That's the configuration side of things. If we scroll down, we're going to find straight away that you can see we've got some personalization. You can name this little craft here. I've got some craft names from my other ones. I'm going to name this here Bluey, just because it's got blue on it. I don't know. Then I'm going to obviously put my own name in here, Brody Reed, for the pilot name, because that's who I am. You don't have to do that, but you may as well while we're here. Then we're going to head down to arming angle. Now what this does is it says if the drone is more than 25 degrees tilt at any point in time, you're not able to arm it, spin the motors up and fly. What you probably want to do here, and you don't have to, I'm going to recommend it, is you put 180 into this. That basically allows it so that up until 180 degrees and then up into the other 180 degrees, so 360, your drone is going to be able to arm no matter the orientation. Now the reason this is important is because if you get stuck in a tree, which I'll say I have definitely done, even if you get stuck anywhere, you probably want to be able to arm the drone when it's hanging like this from a tree so you can try and get it out. If you don't have that, then well, you probably have to climb the tree no matter what. So at least give yourself a chance here. Change that to 180. Okay, then we're going to come over to D-Shot beacon configuration. Now don't stress about the naming here. All that I'm trying to get you to set up is basically a beeper so that when you lose your drone, you can flick a little switch and it's going to go beep, beep, beep. We don't have a beeper installed in the drone, so we're going to utilize the fact that the ESC and the motors can actually make a bit of sound. So come down here, go to beacon tone 4, and then we're going to hit RX lost and RX set, and then save and reboot. Okay, next up, let's head down to the fourth tab, I nearly said the third tab, the fourth tab here, which is power and battery. Now, you're going to want to make sure that these settings are correct. You shouldn't need to change them, but if you do need to change them, this is where you're going to do it. So, onboard ADC, you're going to make sure that both the voltage meter source and the current meter source are both set to onboard ADC. This is basically telling your drone what the minimum cell voltage should be, the maximum cell voltage should be, when to warn you. And don't worry about capacity because obviously you have different capacities, but your cell voltage will remain the same. And this is important when you're flying because you don't want to be telling your drone that you've got, I don't know, X amount more power than you actually do, run the battery super low and it catches on fire or something stupid. So make sure this is onboard ADC, and if it's not, come in here and change it to onboard ADC. Then you're gonna hit save, great, we're done with that. If you don't need to change anything, even better, don't change anything. Now I have just realized one thing, I have already got this little thing called enabled expert mode up the top here. I'm gonna turn that off right now. The fact that you've been seeing all these extra tabs on the side over here, don't worry about that. We're turning that off for now. We'll get to that very shortly. For now, we're gonna head to the presets tab. Now, this is totally optional. I'm gonna recommend that you do it again though. Just follow all the steps here. What we're doing is we're gonna set up our Express LRS to a 250 Hertz link, basically. So we're gonna set this one up. Click here, simply head here, click pick, and then save and reboot. Now we're gonna skip PID tuning for now. We're gonna come back to that very shortly. That is an important step. But for now, we're gonna head to the receiver tab. Okay, so for this next stage, before we actually go into Betaflight's receiver settings, we're gonna get to our controller, we're gonna turn our controller on, and by this stage, you're gonna need to have set up the link between ELRS receiver and your ELRS transmitter, or if you're using Crossfire, FlySky, whatever you're using, make sure that link is set up between your remotes so that you have got the bars and the signal connection between them. What it's going to allow you to do is you're going to be able to see on the screen now, whenever I start moving the sticks, we've got stuff happening. And that's great because, I mean, it allows us to actually figure out what's working and if it's working or not. Before we get too far into it, what we're going to want to make sure we're doing is come over here to receiver. Make sure we've got serial via UART connected. And then, provided that you're using either ELRS or Crossfire, you want to make sure that you've got Crossfire here selected as well. If that was not the case, save it, and then that will be working as it should be now. Ideally, that should already be set up. Now, what you're going to have is you're going to have your roll, your pitch, your yaw, and your throttle. So, your roll is going to be your side to side here, okay? So, if on your right stick, if you're using mode 2 like I am, your right stick, and mode 2 is the most normal way to, or the most common way to fly, should I say. A lot of other people from back in the days might fly a little bit different, mode 3, maybe even mode 1. But for the most part, you'll most likely be flying at mode 2, so this should all be the same for you. Your right hand stick will have a side to side movement. Now that should be affecting the roll on your drone, which you can see on the screen. The roll is going side to side. Then if you were to push that up and down, it should affect the pitch. So we've got pitch forwards, which is what we like. You can see the arrow is showing the front of the drone. So forwards is forwards, backwards is backwards. Come over to the left-hand stick over here, which is our throttle. If you push this up, you should see your throttle slider go up. You should see it go all the way down as well. Up, down, and then if you go side to side, left to right, that should be affecting our yaw, which spins the drone side to side, and it is spinning it when I go to the left, to the left. When I go to the right, to the right. So those are all set up perfectly, exactly how we want them. If it's not, however, you can come here to channel map and you can change where your A, which is roll, your E, which is pitch, your T, which is throttle, and your R, which is yaw. You can switch these letters around, so you could do A, you could do E, A, T, R, save that. Now, your pitch is completely different, and your roll is completely different as well. So it swaps things around. I will run the AETR 1, 2, 3, 4. That is the most common for, obviously, mode 2. Right, the last thing to select on here is telemetry. Turn that on, save and reboot. Bring it back on in, there we go. And now, again, just check everything is working as it should be, and it is for us, which is fantastic. Okay, so for this next stage, we're gonna be taking away from Betaflight again, and we're gonna head over to Google Chrome. Now, this bit is super, super important to make sure that your drone has got absolutely no props on the motors. Make sure that you've also got your little antenna on here. And the reason this is super, super important is because, one, you don't want to have props on. We're about to start these motors up. We're about to work with the motors. And if you have props on, it could take off, and you could also chop your fingers off or other body parts, who knows. Put simply, we don't want it to happen. So make sure your props are off. They should be in a little bag with the rest of your spare parts, which we'll get to very soon. You're also going to need a fully charged battery. This should be a 6S for your drone or whatever you've chosen to go with. I'm using a 6S 1500 milliamp hour. That gives me plenty of charge, and it is fully charged as well. Make sure it's charged because we're going to be utilizing it for a decent amount of time now. So what we're going to head over to is ESC config. Okay. ESCconfigurator.com with a little dash in there. There's a link down in the description to access this one as well, along with all the other links. And what you're going to do is you're going to come over, first up, to Betaflight. Come to Motors. Come to Disabled part here. Go D-Shot 300. And then save and reboot. You don't need to do anything else right now. We're going to come back to that tab. Disconnect yourself from Betaflight. Unplug it. And you're actually going to need to quit Betaflight as well, because otherwise it'll try to automatically connect. Now, grab your battery. Again, make sure there is no props on the drone. Plug it in. Grab your USB. Plug your USB in. And then you're going to find, in a second, we should be able to come up here. I might just reload ESC configurator. Open port selection. Mine is the Betaflight one here. Connect that up, and then hit connect. This is the page that we're looking for. This is what we want. Come down to the bottom here, hit read settings. It's going to read all 4 of your ESCs, which there's basically one ESC for each and every motor that is on your drone. Then you're going to have a whole bunch of nice little settings come up. Yay! You're going to come down to flash all ESCs. You're going to hit flash all ESCs. You're going to select Blue J. Under your ESCs here, you're going to go JH50. And then the version, which is the most recent version at this time, is 0.19.2. There we go. 0.19.2. Then your PWM frequency that we're going to be going with here is 48 Hertz. Hit the flash, boom, don't touch anything. Give it a second to do itself. Right now it's flashing each of the individual ESCs, and it is basically doing what's called RPM filtering, which will, at the end of the day, make your drone fly a whole lot nicer. This you do want to do. So we are slowly coming through. We're just flashing the second ESC right now. We're not doing anything, just waiting, being patient with it, and yeah, letting it continue through. So we're going to come on to the third ESC here. And then we'll come on down to the fourth ESC here as well. So once this is being completed, we're going to, again, wait for it because I'm impatient, but we're going to come up here, come over to disconnect, hit disconnect. That's what we like to hear. Then we can unplug our USB, unplug our battery. We don't need this for right now, so we'll pop that back over here. And then we can exit out of ESC configurator. Right, welcome back to Betaflight. Plug the drone in yet again, because we like to do that. It's going to wait for a second, connect us up, and now we're back within the Motors tab, which is where we want to be. Come down now to bidirectional D-Shot. This requires supported ESC firmware. That's what we've just done with the Blue Jay firmware, so we can now enable that and go agree. We're then going to come down to the number of magnets on the motor belt. Now with these particular motors, the motor datasheet for it says, what do we got? 12N14P. So that means 12 windings and 14 poles. And 14 poles is what we want to put in here. We've already got 14, that's great. Then we're going to leave the motor idle at Betaflight's standard 5.5%. That's perfectly fine. Don't do 3D either, you don't want that. So right now, hit save and reboot. Bring it back up. And now we're going to come over back to the battery. Plug it on in. I'm going to stress this again. Make sure your goddamn props are not on, because this is where we're actually going to be spinning up the motors now to test that everything is correct. So come down to the bottom here. I understand the risks. And what we're going to do is hit that. And now we're actually able to start up each of these individual motors here and be able to test and see if each of these motors here are spinning as they should be. For this, a little bit of paper is going to do you a whole lot of good. So grab yourself a piece of paper, have that to the side. Now, up in this top part here, you're going to see the arrows facing forward. Our drone is facing this way. You can see right now, each of the motors are spinning in an inward direction. We're going to hit most direction is reversed, and then we're going to hit OK. Save and reboot that one again. What this is doing is essentially telling the drone that you want your props to be spinning outwards, there's a whole bunch of debate and controversy on whether or not you should do props in, props out. End of the day, it doesn't actually matter. I like to run props out. I'll show you how to put props on, props out soon. Just do props out for now. If you don't like it, you can always change the props in later on. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're doing props facing out. So you can see a motor direction facing forward on the drone, which is this way. Your props are now going in an outward direction from the back and from the front. That means that each of these motors here, this being our front right, which is number 2, should be spinning clockwise. Our number 4 motor, which is at the top left of the drone, should be spinning counterclockwise. We should then also have a clockwise down bottom left and then counterclockwise on the bottom right. So this is where we're going to test this. Again, come down to I understand the risks. We're going to click here to motor number 1. And now instead of dragging the slider with your mouse, because that can be pretty difficult to control, just click it nice and simply. Motor number 1 is our bottom right motor here. So what we can do is use our arrow keys, pop it up a little bit, get ourselves up to about 1030-ish. You can see our motor is now spinning. I'm going to grab our lovely little piece of paper here. So, by doing this, we can see the paper is moving this way, getting pushed that way. It's not going, right? It's not going that way. So the motors are spinning this way, which means we're going counterclockwise, which is exactly what we want for that particular motor. Great. Now what are we going to do? We're going to come over to motor number 2. Motor number 2 is the top right motor, which is up here. We want this to be going clockwise. So we'll bring this back up to 1030. Bring the paper on. Just like that, you can see we are moving clockwise. Very nice. We'll bring that one back down. Head over to motor number 3, which is our bottom left. We want this one to be going, according to the diagram, anti-clockwise. So bring it up to 1030. So we want this one to be going this way, which it is doing. Fantastic. Now we've got the last one, number 4, which is our top left, and we want this one to be going anti-clockwise. So let's bring that one up to 1030. Beautiful. That is now going counterclockwise, which is exactly what we're after. Bring that one right on back down. So now we know that each of the correct motors are spinning, and we also know that they're all spinning in the correct direction as well. If they are not, however, come here, and you can change your motor direction by clicking motor direction. So basically, say for example, your bottom right motor here is was meant to be spinning anti-clockwise. Say in this case it's spinning clockwise. You're going to go motor direction, come in here, I understand the risks, and you're going to go through the wizard here, and you can set up where each of the motors are and which way they should be spinning. It's super simple. You shouldn't need to do that though. So ideal world, you've just done what I've done, and it's all working beautifully. The last thing to check before we finish up with the motors for now is to come over to your master switch, click on it, and then we're going to use this to the arrow key to go up on the motors again as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to check that on all these little E icons here, that there is 0% on there for all of them. And that's going to be checking that bidirectional D shot is working, which is what we programmed in before with Blue Jay. So we'll click on this. Looks like it's working good to me so far. So you can use your mouse a little bit in this one. Beautiful. Now what we're checking for there again is that the 0 stays as a 0 on the E, which stands for error. If you're getting errors, that's not a good thing, and you should go through, reflash that firmware. But for now, we can unplug, you guessed it, the battery. Now we know that all of our motors are working perfectly fine, they're all spinning in the correct directions. We actually need to bring our controller back into things. I'm going to turn this one right back on. So, now we're going to go into the tab slightly above it, which is the modes tab. This is where we're going to be programming what the switches do on our controller for the drone. And you're going to need, there's plenty of options here, but I'm going to recommend that you set up 4 of them. The first one is the arm, which is here. Arming is going to enable you to actually turn your drone's propellers on and make them spin up your motors with the flick of a switch. That's how you turn the drone on. So this arm range here, you're going to click Add Range, and then you're going to see we have an auto option here. What you're going to do is flick whatever button, whatever switch, you want your arm switch to be, and it should be a full switch, not a momentary. So momentary is where you pull the switch up and you let it go and it goes back down. You want this switch to stay in the same place. So for me, my arm switch is always up here. This is my arm switch, so I'm going to flick that. You can see it is now moving on the screen as I flick that. So that's great, but you can also see that little yellow dot is not landing in any yellow area. So flick the switch down to where it's off, where you don't want the motors to be armed, and you'll see it's here. Then this little range slider up here, we're going to bring this to this end, so when I flick the switch on, you see the little dot is within the yellow range. That means that it's going to enable the arm option whenever this yellow dot is within this range. So if I was to hit save right now, you'll see whenever I flick the switch, it comes up with saying it's disabled because we're within beta flight, so that's good. We don't want them to arm up. But when this is plugged into a normal battery now, the motors will arm whenever my switch is in the arm position. So we'll have it in the off position for now. The next one that I'm going to recommend that you potentially turn on is for your flight modes. Now your flight modes are your angle, horizon, and acro mode, and for that I would recommend you just simply turn on the angle mode. Maybe you could do horizon mode, but just angle for now. Come in here, hit add range. Again, it's going to have the auto select feature ready to go. Find your switch. I'm going to use this switch over here. Flick that, you're going to see it's now enabled. That switch is now over here, hooked up to the angle mode. You can see with the switch fully down, we're not going to have any angle mode on. In the middle we will, and then at the top we wouldn't. I would like to have angle mode enabled only when I am fully at the top. So when I've got these 2 switches here, those 2 are not doing anything, and this third one is indeed doing something. So you don't need to hit save just yet, I was just demonstrating before. Let's come down a little bit further. Scroll ourselves down to beeper. Now remember, we don't have a beeper inside of the aircraft, well inside of the quad, but we do have the ESCs ready to go and become a beeper. Now, this is entirely up to you, but I like to personally have the beeper on a momentary switch because I just like to sort of put it on and then let go when I don't need it. So for that, I use this big switch at the end here. So momentary switch, pull that one up. That is when I want the beeper to be engaged. That's where I want the beeper to not be engaged. So you can see I don't want it to be engaged here, so slide the slider up. That will now mean when my switch is down, like it normally would be, no beeper. When I pull it, now I've got a beeper. So that's great. The last one to add is slightly further down, and it's called flip over after crash. You don't have to have this one enabled, and you've got to be careful because if you're not careful, you can damage your props and you can actually damage the quad, potentially burn things out. But what it does is it allows you to flip your quad over if you've landed upside down on concrete and just go whoop, and it'll flip it up, and it looks kind of cool and sounds cool as well. So if you want to enable that, I would go add range, come over here. I'm going to use this one. I'm going to flick that there. Means that I have got my flip over after crash enabled. So I'll have that up here, and I don't want it to be enabled when it's down. Now, hit the save button. Fantastic. That now means if I hit this, there will be a beeper. If I hit this, we'll be in angle mode. And if I hit this, we'll be in flip over after crash. And of course, my arm switch here. Great thing to do here is actually just quickly disconnect your drone, plug a battery on into it, and then you can test each of these out. So, drone is here. If I want to enable my beeper, that's the beeper. If I want to arm it, it's armed. All 4 motors are spinning. And then we can't really test out the other 2, but you can test them out when we go out in the field. Beautiful. We'll unplug that again. Plug our drone right back on into beta flight because we're still not quite done, but we're getting a lot closer. We're getting a whole lot closer. Right, for now you're okay to shut your controller back down again, and we're going to be looking at the VTX now. So we're going to head on down to video transmitter, and you're going to see there's absolutely nothing in here, nothing selected, and that's okay. What we need to have in here is called a VTX source table, I believe. Yeah, VTX source table, which tells the flight controller which configurations to use with this particular VTX. So for every VTX, it's going to be completely different. We've got to use the VTX table straight from the manufacturer, makes life nice and easy, and that is in the guide. It's also in the description box below. So, head here, go right on over to the SpeedyB manual here, and we can come on down to the frequency table. So this is what we're going to be setting up, but we have got a nice easy way of doing this. If you're using a different VTX, however, you'll definitely find a frequency table that looks similar to this within the flight control manual. So we'll head on down. We're going to find this CLI text. We're going to Command C. We're going to copy it, head back to Betaflight, and come down to the CLI tab. Now, what CLI stands for is Command Line Interface. What it does, it allows you to basically put text prompts straight into the drone, straight into the flight controller, and it can change settings and do things nice and easily. This can come in very handy for a lot of things, but right now, it's going to set up our VTX table. So you've copied that VTX table information over, Command V, Enter. Look at that. Now it's literally doing everything for us. It's going to reconnect it up, and boom, just like that, we've now got a very complicated looking VTX table there. I'm damn glad I didn't have to input that all myself. So use CLI, it's a whole lot more simple. Otherwise, yes, be my guest, go through and individually put all that in yourself if you'd like to. Great, so I'm gonna hit save just to make sure everything's looking good, make sure everything's saved. Then I'm gonna come back to the power and battery tab. So we come over here, we should see up the top here that we've got a power state connected, no. When we connect this battery up, this is the little double check here, should come up with a yes. There we go, yes, 6 cells. That's a 6 cell battery, that's what we want. If you're using a 4S, it'll come up with 4S, or 4 cells. So great, that's working. We can unplug that. That was just a little test to make sure everything's still going on track and exactly how we want it. Now, one of the most exciting parts is coming down to the OSD tab. Now, the OSD is what you see inside the goggles, and it can change, and you don't have to have it in any particular way. In fact, you'll probably find that you'll end up making it a specific way for all your quads, and you'll have a specific set of things you like to have on there. But if you've never done this before, let's get it set up together. So you're going to see there is a 1, 2, and 3, and that is just the profile number, and you can select up to 3 different profiles within here. Let's just do everything on profile number 1 for now and leave it at that, so we'll only be ticking the boxes on the left-hand side that we want. So we come right on down here, we're going to find the first one we want to add is the battery average cell voltage. So click on that. We like that one. What that does is it tells us what the average voltage of every single cell is. That makes it easy whether you're flying 4S, 6S, whatever. It's a great universal number to get used to reading, and I only recently added it to my OSD, actually like a couple of weeks ago. Super handy, great to have. Then we're going to come down to the battery current milliamp hour drawn. Hit on that. That there is just telling you how many milliamps of your battery you've used. For this, we've got a 1500, so say I used 1100 milliamp hours, it's going to show me I've used 1100 milliamp hours. Probably need to think about coming into land sooner rather than later at that stage. If, for example, I had a 1300, it's going to tell me that maybe I've used 800, and in which case, we've got 500 left, so it's good to know that sort of stuff. Then, as we continue to come down a little bit further, you can add something like battery voltage. I'm not massive for that. I also like to add the core temperature on, because core temperature is telling you how hot this is getting in here, and if it's going to overheat on you. Hopefully it won't, it shouldn't do, but it's good to know, especially if you live in a hot environment. So we'll continue to come down. Next one is disarmed. You're going to select that one. What disarm does is it tells you when your drone is disarmed. So when it's disarmed, you know it's disarmed. When you flick arm, it disappears. That message isn't there. So you know whether your motors are spinning, whether you can hear it or not. Very important to have. Let's continue to come down a little bit further. I also like to have a flip after crash arrow on. That's going to tell you when you flick that flip after crash switch, it's going to tell you, hey, you're in flip after crash mode. Don't try and take off with this mode on. Continuing to come down here, I'm going to slowly keep going through. Link quality. Turn this one on. This is going to tell you how good the link is between your goggles and your drone. That's what you want to know. Then, come a little bit further down. You can add your pilot name here if you want to. I like to add my pilot name. I don't like to add the craft name because I personally don't. But the pilot name, I do like to have that on there. It's quite fun. Continue to keep coming down. Then we're going to add in RSSI value. This is going to tell you the connection quality between your remote and your drone. Very important. If it's up at 100, then you got good quality. If it's getting down to like 50s and 60s, your drone's probably going to be in fail-safe mode. So that's a good one to have. Then come right on down and we're going to slap on timer number 2. Fire ourselves right back up to the top here. And you can see we've got timer number 2. Timer number 2 tells you how long you were armed for. And it's got an alarm there as well. I will set the alarm to 0 because I don't think it needs to be on. But we have got total armed time in seconds. I like to have that on. That's a cool one to be able to record. And then I also like to keep on time, alarm down to 0, precision as a second, and I'll show you where we'll enable that in just a moment as well. Right, so now we're going to come down to the warnings. I would keep literally all of these warnings on here. They're pretty damn good and we'll keep them as is. But post-flight statistics, this is kind of a fun one to mess around with a little bit, and it's going to show you in your screen afterwards all your little statistics as such of the flight that you've just had. So battery current draw maximum, that's a good one. Battery milliamp hour used, that's a good one. Battery voltage, that's a good one. Battery voltage minimum, also a good one. ESC temperature maximum, I like to have that on. We don't have a GPS in here, so none of the flight distances will work. Then timer 1 on there as well. Hit save, and we're going to scroll right on back up to the top here. This is where we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to have to move a whole bunch of stuff around, and this is basically where you get to choose where things go within your whole screen. So this is link quality. I'm going to put link quality right up here in the very top corner. I like to have Brody Reed, which is of course my name, in the top for recording purposes. I like to put my core temperature up in this corner. That's the core temperature of the drone, remember. My flip after crash, I put the arrow just in the middle here. It's not necessarily a big one. And I do like to center this a little bit more because I'm a tad nitpicky. Right, I'm just going to sort of spread these out a little bit more so I know what I've got left. Great. So, I'm going to put my disarmed right in the middle here. Low voltage, I like to have a low voltage battery alarm showing up there. I then put all the rest of my battery stuff down in this corner here along with my flight time. And then finally, we're going to put the link quality up in the corner here. Battery voltage, milliamp hours, and of course my flight time there as well. So that's just how I can basically set it up. If I wanted to, I could probably bring all these in a little bit more so they're not all too super squished on the edges. Up to you. This is really a bit about having a bit of fun and playing around and customizing. That is the beauty of FPV drones. So hit save. Make sure you hit save, otherwise it's not going to save. We don't want that. This is where things are going to take a bit of a turn of either being super complicated or doing what I'm going to do and show you and keeping it simple. Being complicated here is going through and properly tuning the drone. Tuning the drone is basically going to give you a much better flight experience. In the long run, it's going to give you a smoother flight experience, and it's going to basically get the most out of this drone that is possible. Betaflight does have a basic tune on everything, and this drone does fly perfectly fine with the Betaflight tune on it, but if you want to make it fly that little bit better, you can either do one of two things: learn the whole process, go through the KiwiQuads guide, and actually do everything, go through, learn and understand it, or you can do what I'm going to do, come over to the KiwiQuads guide, scroll through everything, and then find the CLI settings down the bottom here, over here, down to CLI, and I'm going to paste all of these settings in, and that is now a tuned drone. Thank you very much, KiwiQuads, for tuning my drone for me without me having to do a thing. So again, if you want to learn how to do that exactly, there are very good instructions within this entire guide here. You can go through and take the guesswork out of things and follow along. Now, we have 2 last things to do before we can get out and fly. Sick, right? 2 things, that's it. And one of them is super, super simple. You don't even have to change anything. We're just checking it. But the first one is coming over to your rates. Now, rates are basically the sensitivity of the sticks. I talk a lot about these in my videos because they're something that changed how I fly for the better significantly many times. So that's how sensitive things are with the sticks. If I turn this back on, you'll be able to see that it kind of all affects the way that you fly and the sensitivity of just how quick things go. So what I personally like to do is have a set one single rate across majority of my drones, and for that I use Evan Turner's 533 rates. For you, if you have no idea what you're doing at this point and you've never flown before, just use Betaflight stock rates, leave it as is, don't touch a thing. If you want to use the rates that I personally like to use, you come over here to presets, come in here, search up 533. I use the 533 race rates. I like to pick actual rates, pick, save, and reboot. And now I have got Evan Turner's racing rates on my drone. That's just how I personally like to fly. Where are we? In here. And it is just how I've learned to fly recently, and I really like it. Great. The last thing to do is, as you can see, every damn time I come onto Betaflight, this little option up here is selected. What you're going to do is, if it hasn't been selected for you, you're going to enable it now. Yay, you're an expert. You're going into expert mode. So good stuff. Enable expert mode. Come right on down. You're going to see there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here now. But hit up to fail safe. And this is basically just going to be what happens when your drone, or if your drone loses connection to your remote. It's not just going to keep powering away at the exact same way that you left it. So say you were full throttling away and it loses reception. It's not going to keep full throttling away, because you will lose your drone that way, I promise you. And you could probably be a danger to society as well. So let's not do that. We're going to come down here to stage 2 settings. I'm going to make sure it is on drop. We do not have a GPS, so we cannot do the GPS rescue, but we can do the drop. So if that wasn't selected, select it, hit save and reboot. And now we know that our drone is ready to go. It's in fail safe if it needs to go. And it makes life easy for us because we can go find a drone when it drops out the sky instead of powering off 1,000 kilometers away. If you hit disconnect now and you unplug the drone and you unplug it here and then you do this, congratulations, give yourself a goddamn round of applause, because your drone is nearly, but it's now set up. Everything's done. We just need to put the props on, put the battery straps on, and then we can go out for our first flight. So let's do this together. Let's run through it. Let's get you outside for that first flight. Gonna come in here. Gonna grab your little bag of parts, which should have 2 battery straps, a fruit burst, because you're gonna reward yourself with that very, very soon. And you're also going to need your little nuts from the motors. Now, the fact that we have changed which way the direction of these motors here are spinning means that they are always spinning out. And the best way to do this, now that we know for a fact that our motors are spinning outwards in an outwards direction, it's pretty simple to figure out how to do things. So, take your propeller, pop it on, any propeller, doesn't matter. Pop a propeller on this one. What you're gonna do is get your 2 fingers, come here, and run them straight up and out. So that is an outward direction from the top. Now, you want to make sure that the drone props here have got their pitch facing outwards. So they're going to spin this direction the whole time, which means they're going to provide thrust. If they're spinning that direction and they're on a downward slant, then that's incorrect. Grab your 2 fingers, go upwards, push your props out, and as long as those props are moving with the pitch facing outwards in both directions, you've got them on right. I managed to put those on correctly. For the sake of an example here, I'm going to put these ones on incorrectly. If I was to come down to the bottom props now, and again, hold it so the bottom is facing up now, grab your fingers, come along here, post up like that. These props are now facing, so their pitch is going in the wrong direction. It's facing down as they're going to be spinning outwards, which will be providing no thrust. It'll be providing negative thrust and pushing the drone into the ground. So these props here need to be swapped on over. So we got that one on that side, that one on that side. Now these are both going that way. These are both going that way. We've got the props on correctly. We can grab our prop nuts here. Do them on hand tight for the moment. We're going to grab our prop tool, which is the one that we were using as the hex driver before. Going to come over here and wrong one. You'll see there's like a little ratchet system on these. So whichever way is tight, put it on here and start tightening that up whilst holding the motor at the bottom. So hold the motor, tighten like this, and then when it gets a little bit tighter, sort of grip it pretty decently, give it a good twist arm. You don't want these motors to be spinning without the prop spinning. So make sure they're on well tight. I'm going to do that to all of the props. Yeah. Lovely. Lovely. And prop number 4. Beautiful. Then we're going to come over, grab our 2 battery straps. One of these is a little longer than the other. These 2 different sizes are going to depend on what size battery you're using. I'm going to go for the larger battery strap. You could actually use both of them. I personally just like to use one. Completely up to you. Face it so that the Velcro is facing down. Slide it right on through in the middle here. And then pop it on over. Just like that. You've now got a battery strap on your drone. Good job. That's going to allow us to bring a battery like this here in. Pop it in. Like so. And tighten it up. Like so. Then that's a completed drone. Well done. Just before we head out and fly though, we've got one final thing that I want to get set up. The connection to the goggles. This should be very, very simple. Alright, so within my goggles here, I can come around into whatever way it is that you guys get to your settings to change things. So for me, it is on F7 by default. You can see myself, hello, hello. And we can actually adjust our camera angle in here as well. I might make my camera angle slightly further down. Looks good. This means it's time to go for a flight.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are out in the field and goddamn, am I excited. You've finished your drone, you've got your controller and goggles with you and a few batteries. Let's get this thing set up and let's take it for its first test flight. Holy crap. I'm actually unbelievably excited. This is the sort of experience that you can't get with any other form of FPV drone, because if you buy it, you simply know it's gonna fly, versus when you build it like we have, I don't even know if it's gonna fly. We'll find out in just a moment. Okay, so what we've got with us today is obviously the drone itself, because we built that. And then we come into here, we've got our controller with our ELRS module, because we're running ELRS for this particular build. If of course you've got Crossfire, you have Crossfire in here. Our goggles, which I've currently got charging. You might be thinking, wait, hold on. These aren't the DJI FPV goggles. My DJI FPV goggles literally just broke. So yeah, we're running with these. I don't even know if these are gonna work that well, but we'll find out. 4 6S batteries here. All of them are fully charged. The DJI Action 4, this is for filming. I've attached the GoPro mount, a strap for my controller, and a few batteries for you guys up there. Right, so what you guys are actually gonna be needing is your goggles, your controller. If you want a remote strap, use that. Your batteries, and your drone. Before we get on to any of the real FPV fun though, using the goggles, we're putting them to the side and we're gonna be doing a line of sight hover test. This is to make sure the drone is doing what it's meant to be doing and it's flying properly. If it's not, I hope you brought your laptop with you, because we're gonna need to go into beta flight and change some things. For us though, I'm very hopeful that we're gonna work fine. So I'm gonna get my remote controller, turn this one on first. This is pretty damn important to have this running before that you have any batteries plugged in, make sure that all your switches are down and you won't be accidentally arming it. Then grab a 6S battery if you're running 6S. This is an 1100 milliamp hour. Come over here to your drone, undo your battery strap, pop the battery in, and make sure it is nice and snug. Something that's super important here is that you grab your balance lead wire and you tuck it up in between these cables here, or if you have another battery strap, you can also strap this one down on the back here. This will get in the way of the propellers otherwise. It can flap here, your propeller comes in, chops it off. I've got plenty of those chopped. Not good. Pop it up there, come over here, just like that. You can see that's not going to be coming out anytime soon. Gave it a little twist. That drone is now on and live. Be careful, don't put your fingers near the propellers too much. Let's see if it flies. Okay, so we're going to grab our drone, which is now live, take it to a decently far away place from you. I'm going to pop it over there. And then come over to your controller. You're going to flick that arm switch. Looks like all the props are up and running. And then we're going to do our first hover. So bring it up slowly on your throttle. Look at that. Our drone is hovering. That's a beautiful sight. Now we've got to test out to see if our VTX is doing its right job. So bring it back down, disarm it. I'm actually going to unplug the drone for a second as well, just while I get the goggles set up and ready to run. Now do keep in mind here that this process is going to be different for every goggle. I'm just going to turn these ones on, hook up to the right channel, which for mine right now is F7, and then we'll be ready to record and do our first test flight. I'm also going to end up putting the Action 4 on for this, just for filming purposes. Probably don't do this for your first bit, but I'm going to so you guys can see what the drone is shooting. All right, so same as before, make sure everything is off on your controller. Make sure the controller's on, but all the switches are off. Plug in your drone, take it to a decently far away place with no too many leaves for it to hit on, and then see if we're getting reception. Looks like even in these terrible goggles, I can indeed see what we're working with. So that's good. They're not ideal, but they're gonna do a job for us. Goggles are on. We're gonna arm up and see how our first flight here goes. Woo! Look at you go, team. You have made a drone that flies. I'm actually stoked for you guys. This is awesome. And we've got some decent power in it. Congratulations on building your first ever drone, or if it's not your first drone, congratulations on building whatever number drone this is. You've done so flippin' well. I'm so stoked for you guys. I mean, look at us here. Just filming in the middle of nowhere, flying something that we built. Congratulations guys, seriously, congratulations. If you haven't eaten that fruit burst from the kit yet, now's the time to do that. Eat that, celebrate. And if you want to learn more about FPV drones, about getting into them, everything you need to know to get started with FPV drones, you can watch the video on screen right here. It's going to help you through the entire process, and I run you through the whole time. We'll see you over there.